Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a compilation video with a whole bunch of malicious compliance stories. Before we start, this video is sponsored by my 3D printing website. Check out dangly3d.com where you can get your hands on your own 3D printed Carmen Chameleon KCC channel mascot. And yes, it comes with those cookies you all have been asking me for. There's many other things on the site as well, like these cute dangly kitty earrings, these dragons right here, and a whole bunch of different keychains, like this one, this one, this one, and this one. Check them all out on my website, dangly3d.com. Alright, on to the stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Lola Mist 42. Want me to focus on customers? Fine. This happened a couple of years ago with my last job. I used to work for a pretty popular retail store. I got hired on as a cashier in a town with very little clothing stores, so this particular store was always packed. As soon as I started working, I realized the management sucked. The supervisors always told you one thing and the managers another. They never talked to each other and expected you to do what you were told. I tried listening or explaining whenever what they said contradicted each other, but things always got worse because I was talking back. So I stopped and started always saying, "Yes, ma'am." One day, it was extremely busy. The person who cashiered before me failed to put away their hangers. The store reused hangers and made it a big deal to put them away. The manager who trained me told me between customers I could put away a handful of hangers just so I didn't get overloaded. So that was what I was doing when over the walkie I hear, "Register number 2, get back to your register, don't put away hangers when there are customers." Fine, I won't then. We worked for over 3 hours straight without a break in the line, so the hangers piled up. Under the register was flooded and crammed with hangers. On the counter was a huge pile of hangers. Customers were having trouble putting merchandise on the counter. Finally, the manager who trained me walks over to me and looks so annoyed with it all. She asks why I wasn't putting hangers away between customers. I was told not to, customers come first. She rolled her eyes as she starts to untangle them. "Yeah, but this is unacceptable, there's so much." Today has been busy, and the person before didn't put away their hangers before they went home. So this is 2 shifts worth of hangers. I tried putting them away when so-and-so yelled at me to get back to my register. It took them over an hour to finally get the hangers put away, with 2 of them working at it. They had me skip my break because of how busy it was. The next day, it was busy again, no surprise. The supervisor came up front while I was putting hangers away. We looked at each other while I hung up a hanger, and she went back to her job while I did mine. She didn't bother me again about hangers. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called LazyFair. It says, "What do you mean you skipped your break? Nope, you take your break and let them deal with the hangers." OP responded and said, "Sadly, this job didn't care about laws. They waived lunches to 6 hours even if you said you didn't want to. Had you skip your breaks, and when you told them you needed a break, they would tell you to finish an impossible task before you take your break. One of many reasons I'm so glad I don't work there anymore." Another commenter down below called Starfurry42 said, "Never skip your break or lunch. That time is sacred and must always be used. I have chewed out my wife, not that way you pervs, for skipping break at work if she mentions it. I always take my 2 breaks and lunch. On the rare occasion they ask us to skip lunch, they pay us an hour plus 30 minutes overtime and provide food." Yeah, this one really depends on where you are. I'm in Ontario, Canada, and the employer's only required to give you a 30-minute break for every 5 hours that you work. The 15-minute breaks are not mandated by law. They don't have to give them to you. So if they end up taking one away, there's literally nothing you can do about it. OP, if I were you, I would have figured out which one of those guys was higher ranked and do exactly what they said, and make sure everybody knew that that's exactly what you were doing, because you're just going by the person with the most seniority in your store. This story comes to us from YTYS45. Suspended for being a minute late? Fine. Enjoy handling the biggest project without me. Hey there Reddit, I've been a long-time lurker on this subreddit, and after what happened at my job recently, I just knew I had to share my story. It's a bit of a long one, but trust me, it's worth it. So I'm Mark, and for the past 5 years, I've been working at this mid-sized tech company. It's been great, or at least it was, until 6 months ago, when we got a new HR manager, Susan. Now, Susan is the kind of person who loves rules a bit too much. She came in with this idea to revolutionize the workplace, but all she did was implement a bunch of unnecessary and strict policies. The one that really got under everyone's skin was her new attendance policy. It stated that if anyone was even a minute late more than 3 times in a month, they'd face immediate suspension without pay. No excuses, no exceptions. This was crazy, considering we're all seasoned professionals, not school kids. But Susan was adamant, and the policy was enforced to the letter. Now, I'm usually very punctual, but life happens, right? Just my luck, I ended up being late 3 times in 1 month. The first was because of a massive traffic jam, the second was due to a power outage that killed my alarm, and the third, well, I overslept. Each time, I was barely 5 minutes late, but Susan didn't care. She slapped me with a suspension notice. I was fuming, but then I remembered something important. Our employee handbook. I'd read that thing cover to cover when I first started, and something about the suspension policy stood out to me. I dug up my copy and found the section I was looking for. The policy stated that suspended employees must leave company premises immediately and are not allowed to engage in any work-related activities during their suspension. A plan started to form in my head. You see, at that time, I was in the middle of a critical project for a major client. It was a huge deal for the company, and I was the lead developer. Without me, the project would grind to a halt. So I decided to follow Susan's policy to the letter. The next day, I walked into Susan's office and handed her the suspension notice, along with a printed copy of the employee handbook suspension policy. I told her, as per the company policy, I will be leaving the premises immediately and will not partake in any work-related activities during my suspension, including the Johnson project. The color drained from her face. "You can't just leave the Johnson project," she exclaimed. But I just shrugged and said, "Company policy, Susan. I'm sure you wouldn't want me to break the rules." I gathered my things and left the office. The fallout was immediate. The project team was in disarray without me, and the client was getting antsy about the missed deadlines. The CEO himself called me 2 days into my suspension, begging me to come back. I explained that I was merely following company policy as enforced by Susan. Long story short, the CEO had to intervene. My suspension was lifted, and I was back at work the next day. The best part? Susan's ridiculous policies were all reviewed and mostly scrapped. She's still within the company, but let's just say her enthusiasm for rulemaking has significantly diminished. So there you have it, folks. Sometimes following the rules a little too closely can be the best form of rebellion. And always, always know your employee handbook. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called the Greek Italian. It says, "You did the right thing. I would have walked out of there immediately as well, with or without checking the handbook. A suspension means not coming in, so why would you work?" Wait a second here, did they actually think that OP was going to continue to work without pay? That's not what a suspension is. That's a suspension in pay, but if you're not paying me, I don't have to be there. I think there's a bunch of employees at this job that are getting screwed over by this boss, and maybe should be looking into the labor laws in that area. They might be entitled to a lot of money if they put in a bunch of hours when they weren't actually being paid. This story comes to us from HonestStar7348. Management says I'm losing my unused vacation days because of a new, unpublished handbook rule. Okay, I will comply with the rules of this new unpublished handbook, but these 4 paid unused vacation days will cost you thousands. I worked for a company with great pay and benefits, one of which was vacation days. I worked there for years without any performance or attendance issues. I was also an employee who would not work overtime. I give 100% while I'm there. That's all I have to offer. Other than that, no issues. Each year, I'd pre-planned my vacation days. We had to put our plans on a calendar for approval, and I wanted to receive my approval before confirming my plans. So, I did everything as early as possible. I had no vacation request problems for years, and did not hear of other employees having issues with their vacation time or pay. Then, one year, all of a sudden, after using all but 4 of my vacation days, management said I had no additional paid vacation time. I reviewed our online handbook, gathered my requested and approved time off, and checked my check stubs to verify the paid vacation days I'd taken thus far. I presented everything to management for research. My direct manager said he checked and I didn't have 4 additional vacation days. That wasn't good enough, so I asked him to forward it to his manager. His manager said the same thing. That wasn't good enough. Eventually, my concerns reached the center manager. The center manager called me into a meeting. I again presented my findings, showing I had 4 unused vacation days left. He then began discussing changes to our vacation policy while making eye contact and smiling. He turned his computer around to show me the new handbook they constructed, reflecting the new vacation policy. Wait a minute, what? There is an online employee handbook, yet I am supposed to go by a new handbook not known to the employees? Make that make sense. I politely said, okay, and walked out. I removed my 4 days from the vacation calendar. I then began chatting with the other employees to see the number of days they had taken for that year and the number of days they might have left. Conversations like, how was your vacation? How long did you stay? Are you choosing a different place to spend the rest of your vacation days? Asking these and related questions allowed me to calculate the number of vacation days they used or had remaining. I did not find one other employee having my issue with vacation time. I waited a couple of months and filed a lawsuit while working there. Other employees did not know about my lawsuit, at least not from me, but I'm sure management knew. The lawsuit discovery process revealed an email chain. The email chain showed the center manager directly asking human resources about my 4 unused vacation days, and human resources confirming that I had 4 unused vacation days. The center manager used a fictitious new handbook to cover his and other management's actions, denying my unused vacation time. Shortly after that, we settled, and they paid thousands for 4 unused vacation days. I had to resign, of course, and the center manager and other management lost their positions, retired, or quit. All I wanted was my unused, paid vacation time. But what I received was much more. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Gypsy Danger TMC. It says, but why did they single you out? Another commenter called Zorby1 said, maybe because he wouldn't work overtime? Just a guess based on the available information. OP responded to this and said, I don't know. I didn't work overtime for many years before this incident. I initially thought it was a couple of managers with egos who didn't want to admit they made a mistake. Another commenter down below called Devil's Hour said, 3 things I've learned as management. 1, don't mess with someone's pay. 2, don't mess with someone's time off. 3, don't lie. If you can't discuss something, tell them. Solves most issues and makes for a happier workplace. I like how the boss in this one just tried to cover up their mistake by saying there was a new handbook. OP had read the previous handbook just like the previous OP did and knew what was going on in their company. But it still sounds like OP was getting screwed over because they didn't work any overtime hours. It really is sad that people won't stand up to their bosses to get what is rightfully theirs. OP, thanks for setting a great example. People could learn from what you've done here. This story comes to us from Wolfbane76. You can eat anchovies. Okay, working with the public is always a fun time. I truly believe everyone should have to deal with a Karen with a forced smile. It's a great lesson in tolerance and learning the limits of them. Now, I at the time have been a chef for about 8 years. I have built up a good thick skin at this point, so I can deal with the different breed of Karen you'd however see in my work environment, a tourist hotspot near the ocean. Learning to deal with the unicorn of Karens, the entitled vacationing Mega Karen. VMK for short. Some of my coworkers, namely the younger summer job waitstaff, haven't developed the methods of tolerance yet. So with that lined up, let me get to the story. I was the sous chef of the outdoor terrace-style seafood restaurant by the sea that was also a seaside inn. On this day, a party of 5 came in. Mega Karen, with 4 others, I want to say friends. The entire time, I could hear her complain that the waitress was slow, service was slow, everything was taking too long. We had a full house at the time. Anyway, after chowder bread and a shared appetizer, all of which, according to Mega Karen, took forever to get to the table, it was time to order salads. Now, it's at this point I can tell she has been there before, because she ordered the Caesar salad, but made a point to say, hold the anchovies, because she was allergic. No, at this point I should say that we serve our Caesar salad with 2 anchovies in an X on top of our dish. Now, she had said this in such a harsh way that my little waitress was about in tears, and Mega Karen seemed to be enjoying it. Her friends seemed to be used to the type of behavior. So it was here I decided to step in. I walk over, I'm in my bright white chef coat with the tall paper chef's hat, and spoke to Karen. I'm sorry I couldn't help but overhear. Please let me personally handle your order. We take allergies very seriously. I will be out with your order in a few minutes. So then I stepped inside. Our salad station was indoors. I asked our salad chef to make a Caesar salad without dressing or garnish the anchovies. While I stepped inside the storage room and took the label off the box our dressing came in. 3 minutes after I stepped inside, I came back out and placed a plate of romaine lettuce with Parmesan cheese and croutons. At first, Mega Karen had that smug, victorious look on her face. That lasted about 30 seconds, till she realized, loudly, "Where the frig is my dressing? I asked for a Caesar salad." I, equally as loud but calm, my voice carries like that, "But ma'am, you are allergic. I can't feed you something you are allergic to." She yelled, pointing her finger at me. "I said I'm allergic to anchovies. I had your salad yesterday, and you put anchovies on it. I just want my salad without anchovies. Now go make me one without it." I said, "But ma'am, it's right there in front of you. I have made you an anchovy-free salad, but from what you have just told me, I have good news for you. But let me confirm that you had my salad yesterday." "Yes, I just removed the portion that had the anchovies on it." It's at this point I realized I had the attention of the whole front end. "Ah," I said, "well, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that you are not allergic to anchovies, and the bad is that I know this because you ate some yesterday and are still fine." Putting my hand up to stop her protest, I said, not as loudly but firmly, "Anchovies are one of the main ingredients to Caesar salad dressing." Reaching inside my pocket and pulling out the label, I pointed to the second ingredient, anchovy paste. To this day, I can close my eyes and see her go from red to white and back again. Her friends about fell out of their chairs laughing. Got a chuckle from a few other tables too. My little waitress got one heck of a tip from that table. Likely not from Karen, but from her friends. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called MelBZ1980. It says, "If you are truly allergic, you read every single ingredient. I can't eat some types of ramen, even the cheap kinds, because they add oyster sauce, and I have a shellfish allergy." See, and now I'm here thinking, Caesar salad dressing is awesome. I absolutely love it. But you wouldn't catch me eating an anchovy for the life of me. Something about putting a tiny fish into my mouth, like the whole thing, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I think in this case, Karen really could have just said she doesn't like them, and they wouldn't have put them on the salad. But because Karen decided to make a butt of herself by showing that she never read the ingredients on Caesar salad, they had to make an example out of her. I wish this happened for Karens more often. We really don't see it enough. This story comes to us from Jason the Fuzz. Please divert to the nearest hospital? Okay. This story is not high stakes, but it amused me at the time. I used to work on an ambulance. My partner and I had been called to pick up an older guy with severe dementia. He was non-responsive at baseline because his labs were low or something. Since he was a vet, he needed to go to the veterans hospital. No big deal. We go get him and head off towards the hospital. This was definitely not an emergency, but I was doing my due diligence. Is he alert? Nope. Are his vitals normal? Not really, but he's old and this is his normal according to the paperwork. Any new issues? None. And then the kicker, is he having a stroke? Spoiler alert, no. To check this, we use the FAST acronym. Face, is his face drooping on one side? Arms, is he noticeably weaker on one side? Speech, is his speech slurred? Time, if these answers are yes, then get to the hospital ASAP. This dude had zero symptoms of a stroke. He also couldn't understand what I was saying to him due to the dementia. At worst, one hand twitched when I asked him to squeeze, but it was a random muscle twitch. So I call up the hospital and give my report to the triage nurse. When I mention the twitch, she suddenly cuts me off and tells me I have to divert to the nearest hospital. Then she hangs up on me. I checked my GPS. They are the nearest hospital. Your wish is my command, nurse lady. When we pull in, the ER staff was a little confused. We took the patient into a room, and as the doctors and nurses ran around looking like fools, a different nurse came in and asked what was going on. I explained it was a simple, non-emergency visit because the patient's lab results were low. I heard a snide voice in the background saying, "That's the stroke patient I diverted." I clarified to the nurse that the patient was definitely not having a stroke. I explained my reasoning. I showed her the paperwork that proved this was his baseline, and she even redid the FAST test to confirm. She agreed with me completely, giving a look towards a seat that was suddenly and mysteriously empty. The patient was able to get the appropriate care at the appropriate facility, and hopefully the nurse would be more likely to listen longer in the future. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called LeoRet568. It says, "When I was on ambulances, the VA facilities were only qualified as outpatient. Emergent patients had to go elsewhere, and if they lived long enough, would be transferred to VA. OP responded and said, "The VA near that patient was very capable of handling serious issues, not to mention the fact that his insurance was through the VA, and going anywhere else would have given his family an unwanted and unnecessary bill." Did this nurse just not want to work, or maybe did she know the patient coming in and just not want to deal with them? I don't quite know what was going on here. If you guys think you know what's going on, comment down below and let me know. And if you're on the podcast, well, jump over to YouTube and drop me a comment down below, because I'm kinda lost on this one. This story comes to us from BrightEye006. Small malicious compliance, but very satisfying. Years ago, when flip phones were the hot thing to own, I worked in a factory making paper. 6 people in each shift, constant watching the machine process in case of wrinkles, tears, or sometimes fire. Paper dust in the air had the habit of falling on fast-moving parts of the machines, and presto, almost instant fire. We usually had several small fires every year, but nothing we couldn't handle. We had all worked there 10 years or more, so the trust was high that we did our work and our floor manager John never had to direct us to do something, until one really special day. Something to know about the factory, it was big, really big, so north of it was a workshop with mechanics ready to help us and the other companies in the same building. East of us were loading bays and ramps for trucks. South was another company that laminated and printed paper. West of us was an area rented out short time. Sometimes a mess hall for showing products, and other times shop and warehouse for sports equipment. Everything under the same roof. This is where the problem began. After one of the worst fires we had, I was on vacation, while my coworkers tried to keep the fire as small as possible until the firemen arrived. 3 people ended up with smoke inhalation damage, and 2 of them were okay after a few days. Paul, on the other hand, got lifelong damage. He could still work, but when a company repaired our floor, they used epoxy sealing of cracks, and Paul could suddenly not breathe. Team leader drove him to the hospital, and after inhaling Bricanol, he could breathe again. We now knew how badly damaged his lungs were, and any strong chemical could kill him. I had years of experience working with strong chemicals, so it never bothered me, something that would come into play later. Months after this, we changed work schedule and our shift only worked weekends. Sweet deal with extra pay, only hassle was the burners that would dry the paper. They could sometimes be a pain to fire up, as the safe nature-friendly LPG had problems to start in cold weather. No problem, while we waited for those to work, you could start the rest of the machines that were driven by electricity. Do you all remember the warehouse west of us that sometimes got rented out? Well, for some unknown reason, pressure perhaps, their ventilation pipe was directly over the panels we used to control our machines. Sometimes we could smell leather of jackets being sold next to us. One summer, they sold strawberries there, and after work, we all went there and filled our cars. Those strawberries were dirt cheap. One Saturday, someone had the bright idea to just rent the place for the weekend and spray paint their big lawnmower. We felt the fumes right away. You guessed it, big rush to the hospital with Paul again, and I had a nice talk with the guy. At this time, we were part of the European Union, and as I had worked with chemicals, I knew the papers you had to sign, the people you had to talk to, and the documentation you had to bring with the chemicals just to take the chemicals inside a factory. He had none of that. We talked with the company that owned the factory, and they promised to never let this happen again. That promise lasted 4 months. When I arrived one morning, I saw that the chimney on the factory had no smoke. Odd, I thought, as some of the earlier guys usually fire up the burners right away, as they could be tricky. After changing clothes and ready to open the door to the workplace, I felt it. Nauseating, strong chemical fumes, enough to melt wallpaper. I took a big breath, held it, and rushed to the coffee room. That was soundproof and had rubber insulation at the door. But inside, I still could feel the fumes. Half of the guys were there drinking coffee. The rest of the guys had taken Paul to the hospital again. It was really bad this time. Everything was shut down as nobody could work with fumes like that. They had opened up every door and window they could, but it would take hours before any work could be done. They had talked to a new guy renting the west area, and he had apparently spent the whole night spray painting a combine harvester, and all the fumes had gone directly to us. Now we come to the malicious compliance part finally. While we are sitting there drinking coffee, chatting, and waiting for the fumes to go away, in comes the floor manager. I have never seen John that angry, and while he never said so, I assume he got a call from the CEO that ripped him a new one, as the numbers on the computer said we were working and produced 0 paper for an hour. John must have felt the fumes, but still chewed us all out, even after we explained about the fate of Paul. He was adamant that it wasn't that bad, and every minute the machines don't run is costing the company money. So I stood up and said to the others, "You two stay, I'll go with John to start up the burners." He followed me out while I casually chatted with him, trying to look so unbothered of the fumes as I could. We had several panels to start, so I slowly walked to the first one. I felt the fumes, but I could handle strong chemical fumes as I had done it before. It seemed like the burners were on my side this day, as they absolutely refused to start. Even when they struggle, they usually get the hint about what I want them to do in 10 or 15 minutes. But this day, they were extra obstinate. When we got to the panel number 2, John looked a little green in the face, but as he wanted us to work in the fumes, let us do that. Same problem with the burner again, and I looked at my watch. We had been in the fumes over 30 minutes now. Even I started to feel dizzy and nauseous by now, not that you could see it on my face. I looked happy as normal while working on starting the machines. When we came to the third and last machine, John gave up. He was white in the face and said with a low voice, Perhaps we could wait a while until the fumes cleared up? Whatever you say, I said with a grin. John never yelled at us again, and I had a warm feeling when I think about that day. Fallout. On Monday, the mud really hit the fan, and safety in the place suddenly became priority number one. We had many visits from state departments, sometimes in suits, and other times in white lab coats, measuring this and that. Several machines had to be rebuilt with extra added security features. Work accidents went from 5 a year to just 1, or numbers like that. I'm guessing here. It had a massive effect, and it probably cost a pretty penny to fix. Paul, however, never got really well again, but he retired early and got hefty compensation. Not only the pay he would have received for the years he should have been working until pension, but also damages, both from the company, but also from a special pot of cash the union had for moments like this. Not that it can compensate for lifelong asthma and inability to run more than a minute. Sorry for the long story with small part of malicious compliance, but I wanted to get it off my chest. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called AK47 Brown. It says, "This is a small malicious compliance. Sounds like a potentially lethal, cancer-causing, incredibly dangerous malicious compliance. Holy crap, your factory must be where all those worst-case scenario workplace danger videos come from. OSHA probably made all their guidelines based off of that company. Just casually dealing with fires and chemical fumes, JFC. OP really worries me in this story because you may be able to handle the chemical smells at the time, but those chemicals might have a major effect on your body. It could be many years down the line. You shouldn't put yourself in a situation where you can destroy your body. You only have one." This story comes to us from Agreeable Key 3914. Food allergy charity doesn't want to pay their bills? Enjoy a nutty party. I work in a food catering place which can fulfill allergy-free requests. We have the expertise and care not to include allergic food, either as a hidden ingredient or by accidentally sharing contaminated utensils and pans while cooking. In our experience, the 4 most common allergies are peanuts, tree nuts, eggs, and milk. Cooking meals without these 4 ingredients will usually satisfy everyone at an event. We had a new client, a food allergy advocacy group. They ordered a large catering last month and didn't pay us since. We were out of pocket $2,000 and were considering legal action. This charity had the nerve to place another order with us, but this time a smaller one costing $450. The group asked for the meals to be nut-free vegan instead of nut, egg, milk-free, as this would ensure them a peanut, tree nut, egg, and milk-free event for cheaper, as they would avoid our additional allergy-free preparation fees. This was reckless behavior from the advocacy group, as the party attendees were most likely anaphylactic to milk and egg. Think deadly peanut allergies, but for dairy, milk, cheese, cream, and egg products instead. Had we not known they were a food allergy charity, then we would have not taken as much care in ensuring the meals were egg and dairy free, and would have just focused on the nut-free angle instead. But there was one important thing the charity forgot. It's now possible to buy dairy, which is made from lab-grown milk from yeast. The protein is identical to milk, but is technically vegan. We cooked all the meals with this lab-grown dairy and loaded it in the van. Upon arriving to the function hall, we informed the charity organizers that the meals had lab-grown dairy in them. The charity owner started blasting off on how it was meant to be dairy-free and how they have people deathly allergic to milk in the event. I simply explained that the order was nut-free vegan since we used lab-grown milk, and that they had failed to pay us the last order, and that this was simply going to be our team Christmas party if they didn't accept the order. The owner went ballistic and began pushing me. The rest of us restrained him, and the function hall called the police. The owner lied and told the police that we had dropped and assaulted him. The police asked the function hall for the CCTV and then moved us both along. The police did inform us at the commotion that we could head down to the station tonight and provide a witness statement should we wish to press charges. A few moments later, the owner called and begged for an apology and offered to pay us both the original and today's invoices right there and then. I decided to take the apology and the cash. Our team had a nice pre-Christmas party with the vegan, lab-grown dairy meals. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Reddit Admin Are Morons. I love that name. I don't side-eye charities, but I will always be watching their owners and directors like hawks. They have just as much ability to be arrogant buttholes as anyone that runs a for-profit business or runs for office. I think in this case, I probably would have taken the apology and the money and then pressed charges anyway, because somebody like this isn't going to learn unless they get that slap on the wrist from the law, or in this case, an assault charge, which definitely wouldn't help them in the future. I also learned from this story that lab-grown dairy is a thing, and it sounds horrible. This whole situation could have been avoided though, because when they placed that second order, they should have been told, no, we're not going to fulfill that order until you pay for the original one, and I think you need to pay up front for this one as well. This story comes to us from Emergency Housing 547. Ex-boyfriend told me to freely tell anyone anything about him, so I did. I'm 39 female, and 8 years ago I was dumped by my ex. He's 44 now. I'm usually on good terms with my exes, but that one was a piece of work. He body shamed me. Apparently, a woman weighing 64 kilograms is extremely hefty and unappealing. He forced me to do things I hated, and he cheated for a half a year, not wanting to break up until we go on 2 trips, paid by me. He made a point of telling me in which ways his new girlfriend is better, smarter, read agreeable, and thinner. It was so bad, I ended up in a mental ward. Oh, and he told me that no one would believe me anyway, and nobody cares about how he treats women, so I'm free to bitch online about it. Okay then, I got better, calmed down, and started bitching. I wrote a "don't hire that one" post. He has an extremely rare surname. Only ones I know are either his family or a world famous athlete. It helped me a lot. I wrote how he can't keep a job for more than half a year because he thinks that he's smarter than anyone and argues instead of doing what needs to be done. How his references are fake because these are his friends' contacts, not his employers. How he puts a gazillion of courses in his CV to wear the reader out. His CV is 30 pages long, ain't nobody got time for that, so that they won't catch how little experience he actually has. How he's sure that sleeping with a business contact could be helpful for business, and that women sometimes need... yeah, we'll just stop there. It's all very true. I had screenshots of chats to prove it. Oh, did you mean that I can tell about our breakup, but not about your professional life? Well, you didn't specify. I'm moderately popular at social media, so a month or so later, an HR contacted me to clarify. Apparently, he applied for a position. Well, I saw to it, and he didn't get it. It happened twice more, but I suppose a lot more HRs checking social media just read my post silently. One time, some bikers contacted me for his phone number. He apparently wrote about a girl, a well-known racer, who died in a crash, trashing her as a dumb bitch who deserved it. I suppose that phone call didn't end very well. I check on him once every 2 years or so. No career, no family. Girlfriends are apparently way smarter than me and run away screaming after half a year tops. I suppose that someone did believe me after all. And I'm happily married to a great guy, and I'm a bit famous professionally. Stupid, fat, and ugly me. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called AnyWeird8686. It says, I just can't get over the 30-page CV. That's the kind of thing you expect from a sitcom character. OP responded and said, right? And 3/4 of it are Coursera courses. Mind you, really all over the place courses. Like, he's digital marketing, and courses range from operations to Python 101. Another commenter down below called Freddy Boom Boom 67 said, 1. You're not stupid. 2. You're not fat. 3. You're not ugly. To everyone else, don't stay around people that treat you badly. Nobody deserves that. You are important and you matter. OP, my only advice on this one would be to stop checking in on him. He's not worth your time. You've got a nice new hubby, everything's going well for you, and you can completely write off that portion of your past. This story comes to us from MMW Oxford. Prepaid envelopes can be very expensive. So this happened over 30 years ago when I was 16 in the 1980s. In those days, there were adverts in the press for a record club. This is actual physical albums, where you could get some albums free by signing up, and then get sent 3 a month after that, which you had to pay for by a money order within 30 days or get charged interest. So I used it for a few months and it was okay, but then there was less and less good choices, and I wanted to cancel the subscription. Each month I got the albums, I could return them in prepaid plastic envelopes, but for the first few months, I kept the albums, so had a load of spare prepaid envelopes, important for later. When the quality of albums went down, I just sent them back, but this was becoming a nuisance since it was getting close to when I was due to go to college and move away from home. I contacted the company to cancel the subscription, but that's when they nuked me by saying that I'd agreed to a 36-month rolling contract from each agreed purchase. Waiting 3 years to get rid of this was not an option because I'd need to return every month to my parents to return the albums. I told them I was moving away. They were not interested, thinking they had me, and they did. They told me to send anything back I did not need each month and pay for what I kept, and they would start the ending of my contract from when I stopped buying albums. I made it clear I had stopped. Cue the malicious compliance. I thought about all the things I did not need that I could send them apart from the garbage albums I was being sent each month. My dad did building work on the side of his main job, so we had hardcore and cement in abundance at the back of the house. So I got one of the first plastic prepaid envelopes and filled it with hardcore and wet cement, waiting for it to set. It was almost too heavy for me to carry to the post office, but I got it there. The company had to pay by weight for whatever was in the envelope, so it would have cost a lot. I phoned them 2 weeks after that. I mentioned I had quite a few envelopes, and they wisely decided to cancel my account immediately. If it looks too good to be true, then it is. I learned that at 17. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Dioscurry. It says, "Your trick works well with any group that sends you unsolicited, return postage guaranteed envelopes. Pro tip, you don't need to make it fit inside the envelope. You only need the envelope attached so the address can be read. I found tape works well for this. The post is legally required to send it, and the addressee is legally required to pay for it. You'd be surprised what sort of interesting objects and garbage one can effectively attach one of those labels to. I suggest you experiment." Another commenter down below called George is the coolest said, "That's awesome. Did the post office people raise any eyebrows at sending a literal brick in the post?" OP responded and said, "They marked it as very heavy, but because it was a gray plastic bag, they could not tell what it was. I just said it was returns." Alright, so according to my demographics, most of you guys who are watching this right now are over 35 years old. And at the beginning here, OP had to explain what Columbia House was. I all of a sudden feel really, really old at 42. Also, can someone tell me how to attach one of those labels to a rabid raccoon? This story comes to us from No Cartographer 8435. What professor asks for, professor gets. I had a hand in this malicious compliance, and it was rather nice. First, a little information. Back when I was working as a classroom technician for my local community college after I graduated, the college had a need for a technical scribe for a blind student. They needed someone who could not only provide direction of what the computer was showing on the screen, that the Dragon software that audibly gave cues on what you were doing, was unable to, but also had the technical skills to also know how to work the software that was being used. I fit in perfectly, and so was hired on to do the technical interpreting for the student for the quarter. The professor assigned for the students to create a user interface that did some specific things. Well, the paper that he gave out had a general idea of what the students were to create. To help, but not overly help, I designed the general GUI, graphical user interface, and then let the student do the brunt of the work that Dragon functioned for, and I filled in the gaps by verbally cueing him on where he was and what to do next, because Dragon wasn't giving any cues. Student then turned in the assignment. Professor asks us to come to his office the next day and says that he knows I did the GUI part and it was the student's responsibility to do their own interpretation of what he handed out. I was about to explain, but the student grabbed my arm, politely apologized and said he will do as asked. We leave his office and I ask what's up. He replied, "Can you edit the settings on those laser printers in the computer lab to print a page of nothing but black?" I said, "Sure." So we do so, and after that black page was printed out, we went back to the professor's office. He said, "Well, that was quick." The student handed over the paper, and the professor was very confused. Student then spoke up. "You said for me to design a GUI based off of what you printed. This is what I saw, so I am giving you my interpretation of the image that you printed for the class." At that moment, the professor had a light bulb go off in his head, realizing that he required a blind student to give their interpretation of an image he printed for the class. He apologized, said the previous work will be counted, and for future assignments to proceed as we had been. He then said to the student, "Well played." So in this case, you could say the professor was blindsided by the student. I mean, it's a good thing that the student wasn't in a blind rage. And yes, it was definitely well played. You could even say it was visionary. I love how the student was the blind one in this case, but the professor definitely didn't see that coming. This story comes to us from Unique User. Want me to take a message? Sure. I work in claims, and because we're long-term personal injury claims, we're not considered a call center, but we do take calls from our claimants and need to be available to take calls from claimants. And on average, I receive about 6 to 8 calls a day, but generally, only 4 of those are for me. Recently, there has been a trend of some colleagues putting themselves on unavailable for long periods of time, 3+ hours daily, to avoid calls, and when you reach out to ask if they're free for a call, they don't respond until it's been at least 5 minutes, because in that time, you've probably ended the call for them anyway. I'd taken a call for a colleague named Sally already, and in a department of 100+ colleagues, 2 calls for 1 person is unusual. When I received another call, but this time it was from an external complaints body wanting to ask Sally some questions, which at that stage was not yet a complaint. At 2:32, I message Sally to ask if she's free, and while I wait, I get the background from the nice external complaints person. At 2:42, she replied and said, "Sorry, I was just on a call, everything okay?" And I immediately replied saying, "No, they're still on the call and I can transfer you." Sally immediately backtracks and says, "Sorry, I'm still on the call. Can you take a message?" What Sally doesn't know is that I can see her status and it's set to Do Not Disturb and not on a call. So I know she's just trying to get out of taking calls. But I just agreed and I decided instead of resolving the call, I would take a message and pass it on. As requested, I took a message from the nice external complaints person. As I wasn't able to resolve the query, I confirmed that I would escalate it urgently to Sally's manager and our internal complaints team, as they wanted to know about an urgent payment that hadn't been processed in a week. Sally immediately replied and said I should have said who it was and she'd have taken the call. That's so odd. I thought she was on a call. OP added a quick little edit at the bottom. It says, "Also, before anyone asks, either way, the payment will be processed today, so me taking the message didn't screw anyone other than Sally over." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Gypsy Danger TMC. It says, "God, I hate people like this. Well done, OP." OP responded and said, "Same. I normally would have just approved the payment and gotten it pushed through, but after they lied to me about being on the call, I thought, screw it, laugh out loud." Another commenter down below called NotRasta8913 said, "This trend should definitely be reported to your manager. I get trying to be a bit lazy, but knowingly shifting your work to colleagues is really crappy behavior." OP responded to this one and said, "Yeah, I know that my team gets a disproportionately high level of calls for other teams in comparison to calls for ourselves. So our manager is looking into it to see if we just don't get as many calls, and to work out why we're getting other calls, so they are looking into it. In the meantime, I do what I can to help with easy calls, and I think I'll be taking more messages in the meantime, haha. As long as you don't get in any trouble for doing exactly what Sally told you to do, then I see no problem here. Sally will get written up for call avoidance at some point, and hopefully other people that are slacking in that office will get written up as well. It's sad when most of the work falls on just a small group of people, but unfortunately when people realize they can get away with that, it just keeps on going on. This story comes to us from A Trucker's Thoughts. Wanna discipline me for being right? I got you. I work for a freight delivery company, drive a semi-truck, and usually go out with 10 to 15 deliveries a day. Our policy is that when you deliver to a residence, you have to take a picture with the work phone as an additional proof of delivery. That has morphed into now, if the delivery receipt says residential, you have to take a picture of it regardless if it's going to a business or a house. There are so many small details on a delivery receipt that can get missed, so this is an important detail. One day last week, I have a delivery for Laura Lopez, name changed. It was being delivered to a construction company that Laura is an employee of. The delivery receipt does not say it's residential. I make the delivery and leave, no picture. Next morning, my B of a supervisor says, "I have a write-up for you." Puzzled, I ask her for what. "For the Laura Lopez delivery yesterday, it was residential." I explained to her that it was at a business and the delivery receipt did not say residential. She wasn't having it. I should also mention that her and I butt heads often, and she's been trying to get rid of me for some time. I told her that we need to go talk to my manager about it, so we do, and he sides with me because she has no ground to stand on. This infuriates her. I tell her that under no circumstances will this be an issue again. That day is when I start my malicious compliance. I take pictures with the work phone at every stop. What happens is, when I hit depart on the work phone, it sends a pop-up to her computer with the picture, and she has to acknowledge it before she can do anything else on her computer. I crashed her computer 3 times that day. At one stop, I took 20 pictures. I get a call from her telling me that I have to stop taking pictures. I politely tell her that I'm covering my butt and not going against policy. "I'm giving you an order." I laugh and hang up. Sure as crap, she wrote me up for it. I don't even argue. I say, "We need to take it to my manager." I walk in and he says, "What now?" I tell him the story, he looks at her, takes the write-up and rips it up. Are you seriously writing him up for overperforming? She had no words, and I still take a picture at every stop because I'm petty. Laugh out loud. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Curlboy1. It says, "There are about 25 truck drivers in the world right now and about 10 million jobs. I'd be out the door before that B had finished filling out my name on the write-up." OP responded and said, "Yeah, I hear you, but I'm well paid and love the company. She's a minor setback." Another commenter down below called Dragon Fire Kitten said, "Does everyone's work phone send the photos to her station? Can you get others to follow in your example and have it be like, oh, I heard OP got written up over not taking photos, so I'm also now taking photos at every stop." OP responded to this one and said, "So I've started somewhat of a coup. I know of at least 2 other drivers doing it." Does anybody else think that the manager is now keeping like a paper trail on that supervisor, just looking for a reason to get rid of them as soon as possible? OP, you really need to get all of the other drivers doing this picture thing to get her extremely PO'd so that she does something else that's stupid and the manager can fire her on the spot. Come on, OP, you know you want to. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. Manager asks me to motivate an employee into doing a job he doesn't like. This happened around mid-2006. I was a low-level team leader in a tech consulting company. I was in charge of 2 teams of 3 each. The client was a bank. If you've ever worked with a bank, you know that technology moves pretty slowly in a bank. For instance, the project we worked at was in Java 1.3 that got deprecated in March of '06. One of the guys in my team, let's call him Max Powers, was the kind of guy that's always trying to be on the cutting edge of everything, and we had him working on the project, and he asked several times to migrate the project to a newer version of Java, or be assigned to a project with more up-to-date tech. He just was assigned to this one, but I couldn't do any of those things. I knew he was unmotivated because of this, and I was also pretty bummed about having to work with outdated technology. So we both started researching open source tools to use in the company that were cutting edge, and proposed some improvements to our manager. He liked the idea, so he formed a task force to create tools for the company. The task force was Max and myself. However, this was a side job. Our main responsibilities were still on the bank project. One day, on a team, project leaders and managers meeting, we were talking about desired and undesired rotation, people leaving the company, and how to stop it. I brought Max's case up, saying that we have someone extremely focused on cutting-edge tech, doing boring, outdated stuff, was probably the recipe to undesired rotation. The manager said, "You're wrong, this is totally desired rotation. We want people motivated to work here, he's not." I said, "But he's not because you're unwilling to move him to a project with better tech. Plus, he's one of our best assets by a mile. He's doing the work of 2 to 3 people and the task force. We wouldn't want him to leave, it would be a problem." The manager said, "Then it's your fault, you have to motivate him better." I stopped arguing. To me, Max leaving was totally a case of undesired rotation. It was a problem to my planning, and furthermore, it was losing someone whom I saw as one of the top assets available in the company. But the manager said that I needed to motivate Max better. Cue Malicious Compliance. So I did. I motivated him to get the heck out of the company. He wasn't going to be allowed to work in cutting-edge projects there. He found a new and exciting job in no time. He's a millionaire now. He got called by Google to interview with them. He rejected the offer. He could have been retired by age 38, but he kept on working because he still loves what he does. We struggled to cover him and had to hire 2 more devs, and the task force came to an end. I couldn't do it just by myself, and the rest of the devs weren't as interested in it. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called It Be a Zombie Yo. It says, "Always good to see people lending a helping hand, especially when it's helping a knife into the back of a crappy former employer." Another commenter down below called Y Particle said, "One of my favorite quitting as malicious compliance variants I've seen on here. Nicely done. I was half expecting your motivation to be to pay him the salary of the 2 to 3 people that he was worth. But I doubt that's something you could have done unilaterally." OP responded and said the company had salary steps. He might have moved 1 to 2K above others, and that's it. Huge respect to OP in this case for helping their colleague do what was best for them. I'm actually kind of surprised that OP didn't follow them out the door with their own undesired rotation. OP did mention in another comment though that this was in their first year of working there and they stayed there for 10 years. Wow. This story comes to us from One Glass One, by the book. I work for my country's customs administration. We basically do what you would expect. Anything that comes into my country is subject to duties, levies, and taxes, and the goods can be inspected to ensure all the paperwork filed actually conforms with reality. Certain differences exist between private and commercial goods. Most private goods are not subject to customs duties, exceptions being meat, alcohol, tobacco, and a few other products. But other than that, customs law applies in every aspect to both commercial and private entities crossing the border, meaning that many regulations usually reserved for truck drivers and professionals can easily be applied when it comes to private individuals. This was something a particularly nasty traveler had to realize when he bumped heads with my superior. I was working a night shift at a rather small border station in the north of my country, where me, a colleague, and my superior had activated an irregularly manned border station. Not all border stations are permanently manned, and opening a border station outside of its assigned working hours is referred to as activating it. It was 3:40 in the morning and we didn't see too many cars. The ones that crossed over were foreigners who drove into our country for work. Many of them lived in the border region, knew the procedures, and played ball. Some were friendly, some a bit grumpy, unsurprising if you have to get up that early, but all of them did as we asked. Show some identification, answer our questions about what is in your vehicle, and maybe endure us taking a look inside. And then it arrived, a black Porsche Cayenne. Until then, I didn't even know that Porsche made SUVs. In the Porsche was Mark, not his real name. Mark basically looked like Christian Bale looked while playing Patrick Bateman in the movie American Psycho. The suit, the haircut, his briefcase, everything indicated that he had money and wanted people to know about it, which is fine. People should enjoy having nice things, and signaling is a part of social interaction. We treat everyone the same, and we expected this encounter to go uneventfully as the previous ones. Boy, were we wrong. We nicely asked him for his ID card or passport, which he handed over. We then asked Mark what he was transporting in the car. When he stopped, we saw that there were several cardboard boxes in the trunk and on the back seat, which he answered with, "I don't see how that's any of your business." Bad mistake. It was in fact not only our business, but the very nature of our job. And since Mark had not only failed to answer, but had also failed the attitude test, we ordered him to open the trunk. He got out of the car and opened his mouth again. "I will open the trunk, but just so you know, I want this done by the book. You touching my stuff is unacceptable to begin with. So if you damage anything, or I find as much as a smudge, I will put you in a world of hurt. Now confirm that you understood me, now." At this point, my superior stepped forward. "We have understood you quite well. Now, I just need to know whether you were serious when you said that you want this to be done by the book. Can you confirm that you want this done by the book?" Mark then sealed his fate by answering in the affirmative, upon which my superior updated him on the situation. Splendid. According to customs law, the person crossing the border is responsible for opening and unloading the vehicle he or she drives, must unpack all containers, present the goods for inspection, repackage them, and reload the vehicle. When it comes to non-commercial crossings, we usually do all that, as not to inconvenience private travelers. But since you want this done by the book, you will have to do it. Failure to comply allows me to keep you and your vehicle at this border station for as long as I want. Any kind of resistance allows me to restrain you. And now, get to work, and make sure you don't accidentally damage your own car or its contents. Mark then had to lift several cardboard boxes filled with all kinds of personal items. It appears he was moving apartments into the border station, had to unpack all of them, lay out the contents piece by piece for inspection, repackage everything, and reload his car. Had he simply answered that the boxes contained nothing significant, we would have taken a quick glance into the trunk and he would have been on his way after 3 minutes. This way, the whole procedure took 35 minutes and left some nice sweat stains on Mark's shirt. He filed a complaint. The complaint was dismissed, since everything was done by the book. Jumping down the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called PN Gwyn. It says, "Not sure which country we are talking about, but annoying customs officers is generally a bad move. Just how bad varies, but ranges from a lot of wasted time, paying fines, or a partially dismantled vehicle, and or damaged, cut open or smashed, luggage and cargo." OP responded and said, "My country is somewhere in the middle when it comes to strictness, but people often assume that customs has less power than police. Quite the opposite." Geez, I guess you could say this guy's attitude was a lot to unpack. He was a foreigner though, so maybe he was just used to different customs. You could definitely tell this wasn't at one of the US border crossings though, because they would have stripped the car down to the bare frame just to inconvenience him a little bit further. This story comes to us from Kilted Turtle. "It looks perfect on my monitor. Okay, I can work with that. Working at Big Co with lots of agents in the field. Agents had pretty decent 15-inch laptops to work with customers in the field. New project comes up to give the field people some better tools. Project owner and the other stakeholders haven't been pleased with the way the old apps work. Looks like it was scraped from a 3270 terminal. Pretty close, but well before my time. They make sure I hire a real graphics designer to develop the GUI. Fine, I can do that. Interviews, offers made, designer arrives. Suze is nice. Programming team is excited to start, looks all good. As a gesture of welcome to our IT group, get her the developer setup. Souped up 15-inch laptop, docking station, 2 big monitors. Developers like it, they get to put windows all over the place, life is good. Suze seems to be happy. Pretty soon her, the lead developer, and the business liaison go to make a great GUI experience. Time passes and I check in with the PM. Going okay, on schedule, and we have the GUI walkthrough in the morning. Super! I ask about how that's going to work. Built a mock-up as a static web page, they can just click through the pages. Dev team gave some fake data for the dropdowns. Sounds like it's under control. I go off to see what fires may be getting started elsewhere. Next day, come back from my last meeting of the afternoon. Email box is showing full red alert. Lotus notes, unread emails. And my message light is on my desk phone. Before I can mouse click my way into the mess, my boss comes into my office. OP, what exactly happened in the demo today? No idea. PM says it was all set. Business liaison was good. I had other priority ones, so I skipped it. Poor move. Get on top of the disaster now. Find PM, business liaison, Suze, and started asking questions. Demo in the conference room went fine. They sent the link out to the field people to look at. Field people had some issues. Like what? Well, a few said it was completely unusable, said Suze. She turns, pulls up a browser window on one of her big monitors. This is it, a very nice clear GUI. It looked a little busy to me, lots of boxes on one page. Hey, can you drag that down to your laptop screen? Yep, looks pretty crowded now that it's 1/3 of the size. Suze, it looks a little tight. Yes, but it looks perfect on my monitor, as she slides it back to the big monitor. People in the field have 15-inch screens. Well, we should get them bigger ones, it looks perfect here, and I'm the GUI expert. Sigh. Second sigh. Tell the PM to meet me in my office, tell the others to go home. Long, unhappy conversation with PM, much arm waving, etc. May have used the F word a few times, maybe a few times in the same sentence. Bottom line, was going to be hard to move Suze from the works perfect on my monitor. Next day, Suze comes storming into my office. What the effity F happened to my effing monitors? Some F-wad effing stole them, that effer. Breath. And they left a effing note. What the F does eat the dog food effing mean? Wow, she could be management material. Oh, that's a phrase we use. Eat our own dog food. Every time we build a new system that has user impact, we are the first users. So when it's bad, we get to see it first. Suze yells, what does that mean to me? No F words, maybe not management material. It means that your users have 15-inch screens. You had a giant screen and kept going, it looks perfect on your monitor. Now you have 15-inch screens to see what they see. You know, eat the dog food. Suze sighed and walked away. 4 days later, the revised GUI demo went very well, and she got her monitors back. Monitors were from the IT storage area. They were happy to get rid of 2 of the old monitors, unamused when they came back. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Z4 Driver. Love those cars. It says, seems that in the project description, the must work on a 15-inch screen was missing. Another commenter down below called Nekima says, Suze sounds pretty stupid if she could not understand the obvious issue. She should have been fired. Just the simple fact that she made a recommendation that they give the people in the field larger screens? I mean, come on. You are not thinking clearly, lady. It does kind of make you wonder how somebody gets into a position like this in the first place if they're really not that good at figuring out what exactly it is that they're supposed to be doing. This story comes to us from Bat Kevin. Don't move? Okay. Warning, gross. There is a particular delivery app that I use. The unfortunate thing is that they direct the drivers by what seems to be the fastest route, but isn't always logical. My condo just so happens to be located right next to a senior living community, and it takes the drivers there. I know this and put directions on my orders. I sit by the phone because the app is broken and I cannot contact the driver until they reach out to me. It is an incredibly quick fix, 3 immediate left turns, just annoying. The other day, I placed an order and got a new driver who went to the senior community and spent 30 minutes wandering around, getting further and further away from where I accurately was on the map, before finally calling me. I told him exactly what he needed to do. Go back to the main road and turn left. Then turn left into the very first driveway with the for sale sign next to it. Then make an immediate left as soon as you enter the complex. That is where I am. He said okay and hung up. I then watched as he went back to the main road and turned right. Repeated calls went unanswered, and I watched for another 30 minutes while he went everywhere but the direction towards my home. He finally called me again, and I was able to get him pointed in the right direction, and he even found my complex. He then proceeded to discard all other information I provided and began wandering my complex. He was getting close, so I headed toward my door. Now, it is important to note that I am disabled, hence the heavy delivery app usage, and everything from the belly button down is mostly numb. I don't know I need to use the bathroom until it is near emergency status. He was almost at my door when the feeling hit, and I figured I'd have my order momentarily, so I didn't rush to the bathroom. In the time it took for the app to refresh, he had walked right past me and was nearly on the opposite side of the complex. At this point, I decided to go to the bathroom, and he could now wait for me. Just as I was about to stand up, my phone started ringing. I answered as I stood, and the exertion made me release the contents of my bowels into my pants. The man was screaming into the phone that I give him directions when I looked down and saw a puddle forming on the floor at my feet. I muttered, "You've got to be effing kidding me." The man heard me and shouted, "Don't move," then hung up. The damage was done. I already had a mess to clean up, and it took this idiot 2 hours to go 300 feet. So he can smell the fruits of his labors. I sat back down and waited. It still took him a while, but what was really unfortunate for him is that the order included alcohol, so he had to scan my ID, and my porch light doesn't work. I could have used my phone light, but decided I didn't want to. He saw what was going on at my feet and was trying as hard as he could to get out of there. Hey, you wanted to find me, and now you did. Stay a while. He eventually got my ID to scan, and he ran back to his car while I cleaned myself up. The drinks may have been warm, but they were delicious. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Pandora-tastic. It says, "Why in the world would you keep using that app? Are no other apps available in your area?" So a while back I needed some extra cash, and I actually went out and did deliveries for the company with double D's in their title. Yeah, that one. Anyway, it would take me down some interesting side roads on that GPS, or even to roads that weren't completely finished, or would be better described as an ATV trail. So I can see why somebody wasn't able to find OP's place. And the fact that these apps allow drivers to go and work in areas that they're not familiar with, well, that's a thing as well. Because I'm in my town right now, but if I wanted to, I could pull up the app and go drive in Toronto, or Kingston, or Peterborough, or anywhere that's close by to me where I don't know the town at all. This story comes to us from Orca Mayo. The cop said I had to, so I did exactly that. For context, I used to work as an impound driver in my city. We were the bad guys, and always got angry folks getting their vehicles back. But this one was personally my favorite release I did. One of my coworkers towed an old Ford minivan from the late 90s that was parked in a strip mall's parking lot for being a non-customer. So he brought it to our nearest impound lot. Around a week later, I was assigned to release the car back to the owner at a scheduled time. We give people a grace period of 30 minutes after their appointment, to compensate for traffic and arranging themselves transportation to the impound yards. That being said, him and his girlfriend were late and missed his appointment well after the grace period. Turns out he was out of town for the week to visit friends. I decided to be nice and release the car to them since they had trouble getting here. Boy, were the couple not nice at all, screaming at me and throwing insults left and right. Anyway, I asked for their information. He refused to hand it over because he said that I would steal his info and sell it. I don't know how he came up with that, but whatever. I told him that we don't do that and it's for the paperwork in order to release the car. He made threats to me and said that he would ram my work truck out of the way with his van. I drove a Ford F-450 with a wrecker on the back. There was no way he would be able to. We went back and forth for a good 10 minutes, saying I couldn't release his car without it and would have to leave and reschedule for a later time. He said, "Then I'll just stay here then until you give me my crap," and proceeded to call the police. They arrive after some time and it is well past my shift and I wanted to go home. The officer gets both of our sides of the story and ends up saying, "Just release the car, dude." Tired and wanting to go home, I said fine, but it goes against policy, and he would be charged for the time he wasted, which was about an hour at this point. The officer was satisfied with that answer and told the angry owner. Still angry, he yelled out to me, "And I want the exact price of what I owe, not a penny more." Now here's the malicious compliance. I agree to his terms and start doing the math for the bill. Little did he know, we charge people $22 every minute past the appointment if they have not paid. It's predatory, but it was listed on our price list in the glass countertop. The tow was originally going to be around $440, tow fee, appointment fee, and storage fee every day. It ended up being almost $2,300. He was livid at the price. The officer's eyebrows raised and was slack-jawed, and I was internally smug. I broke down the costs and charges bit by bit. He threw a tantrum as the officer told him, "You did say you wanted the exact price, sir." After he angrily paid for his bill, a late-night coworker showed up and I filled him in on what happened. He told me to just head home and he'll take care of the rest. I start to drive home and I get a call from that coworker and I can hear screaming in the background from the van owner. He told me what happened immediately after I left. Turns out the gentleman who left his van at that strip mall had his catalytic converter stolen and fuel siphoned, so he couldn't drive it home and needed another tow to get it home. I burst out laughing as hard as I could. It was a very well-paid day. It was both a malicious compliance story and a karma story. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Rude PCSB. It says, "I want to like this, but Jesus, those prices are beyond predatory, and I can imagine so many regular people barely getting by, getting effed by this. That guy was a tool though." I am definitely qualified to comment on this one because right before I started KCC, I was a tow truck driver. I thought our prices were bad, but we definitely didn't charge people if they were late getting there. We just didn't let them get the vehicle and we'd charge them another day. In this case, the lot storage fee was $60 a day, and that was actually really reasonable considering some of our competitors. One little recommendation I have is if you ever need to call for a tow truck driver, be nice to that driver. Pretty much every person that driver has to deal with over the course of a day is having one of the worst days they've had in a long time because their vehicles are broken down. That can weigh heavy on the driver themselves, so treat them with some respect. It goes a long way. Oh, and they also like tips, just saying. Our last story today comes to us from, I don't know, my BFF Jill? Cash only, you say? Tow truck story reminded me of my own tow truck malicious compliance a few years ago. Obligatory mobile post, sorry for bad formatting, yada yada. I was living in an apartment with a small lot, and during the winter, if there was a storm, we were supposed to move our car to the street for the plow. Usually, we would get an email and or text with the time to be out by. Usually. So one night, overnight, we get about 1.5 inches of snow. This is a place that gets a decent amount of snow, so no big deal. I wake up at a normal time, no text or anything. It's going to be like 40 degrees and sunny, so it's going to melt anyway. I figure I don't need to bother moving the car, so I sit down to play some video games before I go to work. Around 10 a.m. or so, I hear the plow outside and say, okay, get my boots and coat on and get ready to go. I get outside, plow is gone, and people are starting to move back into the lot. So rather than move my car for the sake of moving it, I clear off the snow, grab my shovel, and clean out around the car where it got plowed in. Honestly, our plow drivers suck, so it was the cleanest spot in the lot. Go back inside for an hour or so, walk outside to go to work, and car is gone. What's that about? I didn't get any call or notification or anything. Nobody knocked on my door. I'm 99% sure it got towed, but I'm fuming, so I called the police non-emergency line to report it stolen. Police, super helpful. I explained the situation and that it's probably towed, but I'm confused as to why it was towed. They say it's a civil matter, so they aren't going to charge anyone with theft, but they are at least able to locate where the car is. Tow shop across town, $15 cab fee, whoopee. Call the shop to confirm my car is there and see what the damage is. $180 cash only. This is like 2019 in the United States, so cash only, kinda weird. But I was working at a winery making tips, so I had a lot of cash saved for a rainy day, luckily. A quirk of that is that being a small place, oftentimes the tips are in small bills, and we usually don't have enough big bills to exchange them. So on a day I make $100 plus in tips, I leave with a lot of 1s and 5s. First, I tackle my change jar and count out $18 of loose change. Then I get the rest of the cash, as many 1s as I can, then 2 5s gets me to $180 even. Perfect. Honestly, this was only half malicious and half wanting to take the opportunity to unload the absurd amount of cash I had laying around. But off I go. Get to the shop, ask if there's anything they can do because I really don't think they had a real reason to tow me. Nope, nothing we can do, just following orders, the person behind the counter says with a very smug grin. Her grin turned to horror when I pulled out the change bag. I spend the next 15 minutes watching her meticulously count out pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, 1s, 5s, $180 even. I'm $10 short. I misheard her on the phone, it was $190. I pull a 20 out of my wallet and ask for the 2 5s back. Oh man, was she pissed. Was this petty, and did the tow truck desk lady do nothing wrong? Absolutely. But if you're gonna tow people's cars and make them pay nearly $200 in cash, don't be surprised when they bring cash. Okay, again, coming from somebody who's had experience taking cars out of parking lots, in fact, even in situations just like this one, the tow company gets a call. They're told the license plate of the car they need to move, and that's the car they go and move. There's really no questions asked. OP actually acknowledged this as well in a comment to another person. It says, management company called in the tow. I was technically at fault since it did snow and I didn't move my car. Sure, I didn't obstruct the plow really at all, and I cleaned the spot that he wasn't able to get to because I was in, so they didn't need to tow me, they just wanted to be petty. Tow company was following orders, guy gets called to tow this car from the lot, he doesn't ask questions, I get that. There's a really good chance that the tow company was called as soon as the plow arrived because OP's car was still in the parking lot, but it took a while for the actual tow truck to get there. The tow driver just says, well, that's the car I'm supposed to get, that's the car I'm gonna bring back, because the tow driver doesn't want to be fired. This story comes to us from F Work. Am I remote or not? I live in a 4-season state and work in manufacturing. So this story begins when I got this job a couple years ago. I felt bored at my old job as a machine operator and wanted a challenge. So I took a job as a programmer for industrial manufacturing machines at a prototype shop. I had a bit of experience doing fabrication and prototypes, but no experience programming. This company promised me training, self-management, and the ability to work remotely when needed. I've been trained and have some good experience under my belt, but still a lot to learn. No one else at the company does what I do, therefore no one knows the amount of computer work there is, from designing parts or fixtures, quoting, picking tools, designing the process, programming, research and development, etc. We wear a lot of hats, so my job is a little bit of everything. Technically, I work in the back warehouse under 2 supervisors, my direct supervisor and his supervisor co-CEO. Since I'm back there part-time and in my office on the computer part-time, I have 2 supervisors, I guess. It's kind of a weird dynamic and hard to explain, but just know it's poorly managed, micromanaged, and my supervisor and I hate it. Fast forward to a couple weeks ago, there was a snowstorm and the office had a half day. I live about an hour north from the office and usually get more snow than they do. I decided to work remotely for the day instead of going into the office. I got a lot of work done and I was proud of my accomplishments for the day. I briefed my supervisor on what I did for the day and he said, "Great work." The next few days, my supervisor is trying to implement a progress tracker since we have no way of tracking projects other than me saying how far I got. Just a simple spreadsheet, no problem, I get it. We are a small company and the CEO is a busy guy. He doesn't always know the status, and since we all wear many hats, the rest of the team should know the status also. A few days ago, I had to rush home for an emergency. Something was going on at my house, not that important to the story. I mentioned to my supervisor that I will be working remotely the rest of the day. He said something along the lines of, "Well, some people didn't like that you worked remote last time. Your job isn't really a remote job." I was a little taken back, since it's probably 75% computer work, and I've been slow in the shop while waiting on tools to ship. I defended myself. It's not like I don't do anything, there's still plenty to do. The office was closed and everyone else in the back got a snow day while I worked remotely, and someone got mad at that? He agreed with me. It's silly and we both know. I ended up rushing home, getting there late because I was talking about what I should do the rest of the day and how to fill out the tracker spreadsheet so I can prove to the micromanaging CEO that I work. I told him I've never had to prove to anyone that I'm working before. I went home and ended up taking the rest of the day off anyway to deal with the issues at home and not make anyone upset or question if I worked or not. So yesterday I got an email that we are closed tomorrow due to weather, work remote if possible. I asked my supervisor, "What do I do?" He said, "Well, do this or that, blah blah." I said, "No, I mean, my job's not really remote, and everyone else that isn't capable of remote work gets the day off. You expect me to work tomorrow?" He gave me a look as if to say, "Really?" I spoke to some other coworkers and they aren't working. Why am I the only one working? Well, guess what? I turned my alarm off. I'm not logging onto my computer and I might monitor emails in case something important pops up. My supervisor jokingly said, "Take a machine home with you to work remote," implying I can't work remotely since I need to run machines. Ha, very funny. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called RatDad. It says, "Don't put up with this someone said tactic. Ask who said that. If this person is not in your management chain, ask why their mid-informed opinion is important. Ask your supervisor to please manage these perceptions and establish a clear policy so you can get some work done." There are 2 likely scenarios. 1, management wants you on site but is not strong enough to say so. 2, management does not care to deal with the rumor mill and is happy to put the burden on you. Another commenter down below called Max Spring Puma said, "Did anyone actually complain or was it just your boss? If it really wasn't a big deal to your boss, he could have waved away any complaint with a simple explanation." OP responded to this one and said, "The CEO complained. He's the only one who cares and has complained before. For example, he had a modification to a prototype I had to make. I said sure, no problem. Sat on the computer, changed the model, reprogrammed with new tooling, and slight change of process. Processed the G-code to put in the machine, and before I could set up and run, he complained that he asked me to do this hours ago and I just sat on the computer instead. I started to learn that it doesn't matter if it's done right as long as it was done yesterday. It sounds to me like it's time to look into your job description and see if it actually does say remote work anywhere in that job description. And if it doesn't, then you take snow days just like everybody else who works in the back of the warehouse. I just want to say before we close this one off that your CEO sounds like they don't really know what's going on below them, and that definitely doesn't bode well for the future of the company. This story comes to us from Doing the Humpty Dance. Okay, you win. We will practice and play on the other field. Several years ago, I coached a kids' soccer team. It was a community recreation league with volunteer coaches with a focus on fun and equal playing time. There were 2 fields next to a school. The third field is a 2-minute walk away and hidden behind a thick stand of trees, invisible from the 2 fields. One would never know it was there, but did have a small parking lot next to it, accessible only by a rarely used, poorly maintained back lane. Most people would park in the school lot and walk the 2 minutes along the path through the trees. The 2 fields next to the school were typical school fields, not particularly well maintained, uneven, and definitely not regulation sized, typical school fields. The third field was regulation sized, perfectly maintained, had new bleachers, and was maintained like a professional field with regular waterings, cutting, and seeding. It was the groundskeeper's pride and joy. It was the first day of a new season, and my team of 10-year-olds, the Brown Pandas, our t-shirts were brown with pandas on them, showed up for our first practice. Except there was another team on our assigned field, a team of talented players with matching socks and shorts. We're all wearing cleats and all in their late teens. I approached the coach and explained that he was on our field and that his field was a 2-minute walk away down the path. He politely told me to take a hike. He was there first, and that was that. So, not looking for a confrontation, I took my team to the really nice field. The parents had bleachers to sit in, and we had a great time on the big boy field. After the practice, the groundskeeper governor asked me why we were practicing on this field. I told her what happened with the other coach. She told me she asked the other coach to switch fields also. He told her to get stuffed, and that was his field. 2 days later, at our second practice, his team was on our field again. The governor called me over to talk to her and the other coach. She stated, "Just to confirm for the rest of the season, you are switching fields with the Brown Pandas on the far field, and your team on this field here?" "Yeah, this is our field, and the little kids will be on the far field." He looked at us arrogantly. "Fine by me," I stated, grabbed my big net sack of balls, and trudged over to the professional field. 2 glorious weeks passed when during practice, the other coach came over with his team and saw our field. He approached me and told me that we needed to switch fields. I laughed in his face. "Go get the governor so we can discuss." I turned my back on him and probably did something like tie a kid's shoe or dry some tears. Remember, they were 10-year-olds. His team started trying to use our field. One of the Brown Pandas was scared of the bigger kids and started crying. A couple of parents stepped in and started shooing them away before one of the 10-year-olds got hurt. He returned with his entire team and the governor. She was beaming. She asked him if he remembered our conversation of 2 weeks ago. He started to argue. She told him that we were keeping with the terms of that agreement and to go back to his own field. "Go on, scoot," I remember her saying. We had our first game the next week. All the Brown Panda parents were in attendance, watching their children playing soccer on a beautiful field with semi-comfortable seating and a working scoreboard. As we left, we walked by the other team playing on a muddy, undersized field. They eventually changed their game dates and times so they could use the big field, but had to practice on the old field. The Brown Pandas never had to set foot on the older field all season. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Lost Wanderer Kind. It says, "As a former school soccer player, that must have meant so much to the kids to play on a nice field. And the big kids must have been so annoyed. Way to stick it to their stuck-up coach." OP responded and said, "It gets better. The field was way too big for these kids, so we used water bottles as goalposts until the goalie kept drinking from them and not putting them back in the right place. so we switched to gym bags and balled up sweatshirts. I'm sorry, this might be unbearable, but it sounds like this whole story was pure pandemonium. I'm just glad that at the end, everybody was on a level playing field. I can honestly only imagine how excited those kids would be playing on the big kids field. That is a memory that they're gonna have for a long time, so OP, good for you for standing your ground. This story comes to us from ShallowHal99, Procedure Documentation. I used to work for a small company which was acquired by a group of investors, did not do a good job of hiding that they are planning to replace everyone with low-skill contractors and sell the company. For all of 2023, they've been pushing us non-stop to update our procedure documentation. Our senior manager announced in fiscal year 23 that there will be a monthly quota for procedure documentation. When there was pushback, his response was that it doesn't always have to be complicated procedures or a perfect procedure. He was always spouting something about not letting perfection get in the way of progress, etc. I was already thinking about leaving to finish my degree, so I immediately began the application process. But in the meantime, for most of 2023, I met my quota by documenting the most unnecessary procedures, but I gave them corporate descriptions, so it's not immediately obvious. Some of my favorites: how to turn on my computer, accessing information technology resources, how to log on to my computer, utilizing security practices for informational technology resources, how I delete and move files out of Google Drive, allocating digital assets for collaborative processes, how to block your Outlook calendar, automating availability information across teams, how to request new office supplies from Staples, physical asset procurement. Since our team will be let go in any acquisition pretty early in the process, most of the lower level managers left or were checked out as they job search. My manager had been so distracted that they never reviewed any of my procedures. I asked for feedback on a few real procedures to make it seem like I was doing what they asked, and basically, they simply checked off that I've been meeting my quota. I left the job in December and have started school this spring, but I just heard from an ex-colleague who is still with the company. They just discovered my procedures. He just texted me and said the senior manager is furious because other people were basically doing the same thing. And now most of our team has left and they barely have anything documented. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Edwivas. It says, if you want people to do a proper job explaining what to do, you should probably give them a reason to do it, or at least check that they are in fact doing it. OP responded to this one and said, you mean the minimal pay and horrible work culture isn't enough? But we provide donuts on Mondays. Gosh, no one wants to work anymore. Sarcasm. I don't think the higher-ups ever think that the people lower down are going to realize what's going on. But if all of a sudden they're asking you to document exactly how things are done for your jobs, well, you can pretty much assume that you're not going to be in that job very much longer. They want documentation so they can teach somebody else who's going to be cheaper how to do that job. OP, I'd say you handled this perfectly. Let them flounder when they realize that all of that documentation isn't going to help them one bit. This story comes to us from Big Guy 011890. Not allowed to wear coats with hoods? Alright, I'll put up with hypothermia. I, 34 male, work for a company famous for being anti-union, pro-insurrectionist sympathizers, having 2 registers open with lines longer than the drive-thru lines at Chick-fil-A. The part of the store I work on is OGP as a dispenser, and during the fall when it's chilly out, we were allowed to wear our hoodies outside, along with heavy coats in the winter. Last week, a rule was implemented saying we were no longer allowed to wear hoodies. Alright, no problem, so I started wearing my heavy winter coat as a substitution, which still had a hood. One of my immediate supervisors, let's call her Karen, also not her real name, because the name I originally used to describe entitled customers is Candace. I had a bad experience with her, but that's a story for another time. she tells me that my heavy winter coat still violates the no hood rule, and I had to tuck it in. I had a better idea because it was malicious compliance time, so I hung my heavy winter coat up and put my beanie on as the only way to stay warm, since no one was allowed to wear any form of winter clothing unless it was hoodless. The first day I saw myself in the two-way mirror, I couldn't help but think about the SpongeBob episode, Can You Spare a Dime? Pantomiming myself shaking a tin can, asking, spare change? Most parents and my generation will know what I'm talking about with the joke. Anyway, back to the story, I started going out in close to freezing temperatures, and some of the delivery drivers started asking me where's my coat. I couldn't help but be honest when they learned we weren't allowed to wear either hoodies or coats with hoodies, and they wouldn't make exceptions for cart pushers and dispensers. This went on for about a week until, as of today, we got an update on the no coat with hood rule. Now, dispensers are allowed to wear hooded coats outside again when dispensing, as long as safety is visible. I don't know what sparked the sudden change, but I want to think I had something to do with it when telling our delivery drivers and customers about the ridiculous rule change, knowing this company would rather donate to keep insurrectionist sympathizers in office over having to pay out a possible class action suit. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Mental Operation 4188. It says, class action lawsuits are a great source of extra income for Walmart employees. I haven't worked there for 6 years and got a $400 check last August. I think what happened in this case is that somebody put in a complaint about OP just wearing regular clothing and a beanie outside when it was freezing cold, and the company saw that as a legal threat, so they decided to change the way that they worded things. It is kind of interesting though, because OP didn't make mention that he had to actually take off the coat, just that he had to put down the hood or tuck it in. And honestly, a hood when you're working outside in a parking lot is a safety concern because you can't really see beside you, so I also understand the side of Walmart in this case. This story comes to us from ShellUser42. I need to use these RSI tools, if you say so. Backstory. This happened quite a few years ago. I was the systems administrator for a small startup media design company. We had approximately 14 people on staff, and it was a very relaxed atmosphere. Just for context, a little thing about me. I am a bit of a geek and nerd, and the computer also takes a bit part of my personal life. It fuels some of my biggest hobbies, not just gaming, but I also enjoy messing with digital audio, 3D graphics, and as can be seen by this post, I also enjoy online communities. Most importantly, I really enjoyed my work, and thus noteworthy, it wouldn't be the first time when I took some work home with me. That is, I had remote access to our small network, so when something needed to be done, I could often do so from home. And before we continue, I'd also like to emphasize that I truly believe in the good intentions of the bosses. They were really just trying to look after us best as they could. Our main Carl, on the other hand, the big project RSI training. The company was run by two bosses, but as work piled up for them, assumption on my part, they started to rely on an office manager, and this dude would sometimes seriously overstate his own importance. At the time of the story, the company had closed a deal with none other than the city council to set up a digital meet and greet with the council members. This sounds horribly trivial right now because online chatting facilities are pretty common these days, but back then, it was all still quite new. Because I spent a large chunk of my private time online on IRC back then, it didn't take long for the bosses to decide that I should fully handle the technical details of the whole thing, and of course, closely work together with our designers. The whole interaction would take place on a custom-built website with chat interface, and, as said, an IRC server as backend. In other words, visitors would use a website to chat using said website, but the whole thing basically ran on an IRC server. Normal users couldn't access that server directly, but obviously I could. I still remember to this very day because I got official permission to use IRC at work, so obviously I kept some of my favorite public chats around as well. IRSSI, Linux-based IRC client, was awesome like that, because it could easily connect to multiple servers at the same time. But I digress. The incident. Because the bosses wanted everything to be perfect, they decided to hire an ergonomic specialist who would advise all of us staff members on how to prevent RSI. In case you're not aware, this stands for repetitive strain injury, which is basically a muscle issue caused by, usually, repetitive motion, and a whole plethora of other things. We all followed along, and all of us got some new equipment to use our computers more safer. Cushion pads in front of the keyboard, different chairs with arm legs, a mandatory stress ball, and some other things. Now, despite the fact that I was very skeptical about the whole thing, I still decided to keep an open mind. And try things out to see where it would lead. I mean, couldn't hurt, right? Well, wrong. After 2 days, I started to notice problems at home. My hands began to hurt. I started getting issues with typing, and me and some online friends got creamed at a Quake tournament, which for a large part, but not all of it, was because of me. No, I wasn't some awesome star Quake player, have never been, but I could still hold my grounds. But that evening, I totally sucked. It was bad, really bad. Of course, I had a good hunch what was causing all this, so the next day at work, I dumped all those RSI gizmos into a closet and went back to the way things were. One of the bosses did briefly ask me about it, but I explained that it just wasn't working out for me and that I was actually starting to get issues. He fully understood, but for some dumb reason, the office manager didn't. You have to use those tools, otherwise you're wasting company money. As I suspected, things got a lot better for me, but later that afternoon, the office manager noticed what was going on, and he threw a fit. What in the world was I thinking? Did I have any idea how much money the company had spent on all those improvements? And never mind about me, what if other people needed to use my computer? Then they needed those aids to be there. To which I commented that, as far as I was aware, no one was allowed behind my PC, because my network security clearance was practically the same as the boss's. Because of my support role, I had full access to everything. If I wanted to, I could easily pull up all of our financial records, for example. Something that actually happened at one time when an external accountant made a visit and needed some of our data. My boss asked me to help them out and thus cleared me to do all of that. I still remember because it made me very uncomfortable despite barely getting to see anything. Anyway, the manager didn't like that comment. First, I figured that I would just leave those RSI gizmos laying at the side of my desk, but no, he insisted that I just didn't understand what was good for me, and that I had to use those tools. So I complied, though very carefully. That day, my speed at getting work done for the big project plummeted, big time. For obvious reasons, I was also no longer doing anything from home anymore. In fact, I had excused myself on IRC and said that I would be taking a break because of the way things went and would severely limit my overall PC time at home as well. Books, fantasy novels, Dragon Lace for the win, and TV can also be fun. But as I had expected, my complaints became worse. Houston, we have a major problem. After having spent a whole weekend with barely any private PC interaction, things got from bad to worse that next Monday at work. Even typing became a chore for me. Me, who can type blindly with 2 hands, 4 fingers, at a very decent speed, and without having followed any typing courses. So I took the afternoon off and went to visit my local doctor. His first comment when I described my problems and my theory as to what was causing all of it, "Yeah, you're not the first one with such issues. There seems to be quite a few companies active right now who claim to help prevent RSI, but in fact, they're merely fueling a sales model." When I didn't fully understand what he was talking about, he told me that in his opinion, that ergonomic expert was only in it for the money to sell his merchandise. According to my doctor, the guy should at the very least have realized that if I was already using computers so intensively, both at work and at home, then I was probably already aware of the importance to rest your arms. Instead of dismissing all that, he should have given that some extra thought and anticipate for it. So the doctor wrote me a prescription. First, an ointment to help relax my wrists and arm muscles, then a mandatory 2-week break from work to help recover from having developed mild yet disturbing symptoms of RSI due to unprofessional conduct. The big project was next week, and we weren't even near ready. I honestly felt bad for my boss the next day when I told him what had happened while handing him my doctor's note. He was not happy. He was fuming. No, not directed at me. I had his full support and sympathy, but he still turned red and stomped off to the office manager's desk, with me following him. Of course, the office manager denied everything. I had simply misunderstood him. No way would he demand something as dangerous as that. This is when I learned 2 things. 1. Always document things to cover your butt, something I obviously hadn't done. 2. Working in smaller companies rules. See, while the bosses had their own office, the rest of us sat at tables in a large room, spread over 2 areas. So the moment the office manager started denying things, some of my coworkers immediately stepped up. Oh, does that mean I can finally throw this thing in the trash then, without getting fired? My colleague and former friend sneered. Former contact simply watered down over time. The boss turns to me. Shell, why don't you go home and rest? No need to get involved with the upcoming drama. To which I nodded and thanked him. But I also told him that I would be contacting them later that week to try and help sort things out. I wasn't sure, but still saw a possible way out of the upcoming doom scenario. Aftermath. As much as I wanted to ignore the whole thing and just do my own thing, I decided to stick with no PC time at home for the next 3 days just in case. Thursday evening, I hopped back online for a short hour and did some asking around. First, I called my colleague friend from work to ask him about the status of the project, in specific, if the designers managed to finish the website. Then I reached out to a dear online friend of mine who also happened to be an undernet IRC operator, and I asked him if there would be a possibility to link our website front end directly to his server using a dedicated port connection for security purposes. See, the only reason we purchased a commercial IRC server was to comply with certain regulations, security reasons being one of them. Now, my idea obviously wasn't fully on par with all of that, but if you can't trust an official undernet server to be safe, then who can you? Yeah, that was meant to be as a bit of a joke, but what you don't know can't hurt, eh? Or something like that. So I contacted my boss the next day and told him about my plans, and that there would still be a way to salvage the whole thing. Though he might not fully like how I was planning on doing that. To which he, jokingly, responded that he was already pissed that I was gone for 2 weeks, so how much worse could it get? Well, the next week, the online chat session worked perfectly. We basically set up a dedicated chat channel, my IRCOP friend set up an X instance to keep things safe and quiet, and the chat attendance was quite decent. The week after that, when I got back to work, I did have a small run-in with the office manager, who told me that he wasn't happy that I hadn't just told him what the problem was. But I decided not to get into that again, and simply responded that he also could have chosen to trust my judgment when I told him I didn't want to use those RSI gizmos. We kept things cordial, but according to my friend, the manager never seemed to dare and question any of my decisions again. I really don't know for sure, but he was convinced. I even joked about it that I would try and keep it in mind when I was going to ask for vacation leave, which never happened, of course. And there you have it. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Anna V. It says, Oh man, the ergonomic boom back then was crazy. I remember many had to change to the weird roller mouse thingy that's in front of your desktop. To be fair, that is an awesome product, I just never learned to use them. And the weirdly shaped cushions in front of mouse pads and keyboards, and then the natural keyboard models, it was a weird time. I was working then in a small computer shop run by the couple next door from where I lived. We got a visit from an ergonomic specialist too, because it was mandated by the city or something, I don't remember and or know. Thankfully, that didn't lead to anything forced, and it was mainly for checking if our chairs were old and crap. As somebody who spends a very good portion of his day sitting at the computer every single day, I can tell you that some of the ergonomic stuff actually does make sense. But the most important thing is to have your keyboard at the right height and have a good chair. My gosh, the difference a good chair makes to how you feel at the end of a workday. Oh, that is the one you want to spend the money on. One thing that came out of that ergonomic boom was the Logitech Wave keyboard. I had one of those for so many years, and I actually loved it. But anybody else I knew who wasn't as proficient at typing absolutely hated that keyboard because of how it was kind of split in the middle. This story comes to us from EagleFeather148. You won't let me tell you the food you bought is moldy? Okay, you can just eat it then. This isn't my story, but a coworker I have. I work in an airport restaurant. You can imagine we get a lot of stuck up and bitchy people who don't see us as humans. We work our butts off to provide the best service we can under the circumstances, working in an airport setting with unpredictable passenger numbers. For context, our restaurant is split into two separate cafes. Mine is the one before TSA, the one relevant to this story happened past TSA. Meaning this was a passenger that either went through TSA or came off a plane from the departure lounge. The kitchen staff had hand-prepared trays of vegetables with a portion of hummus. One of those vegetables is sliced cucumbers. Today, my assistant manager, who runs the kitchen past security, came up to me and told me I needed to check the trays I had for sale because they found mold on the cucumbers in their trays even when they hadn't reached to expiration we have for prepared fresh foods, such as the tray in question. I subsequently pulled my trays because they did, in fact, have mold on them. Enter Act 2 of this story. He came to me about 30 minutes later to tell me this part. Back in post-security past TSA, a lady had bought a vegetable tray. Being the good assistant manager he is, he went over to make sure that it was a fresh tray. She didn't let him even get more than one word out before telling him, "Go away, leave me alone." Now, he isn't a mean person at all. In fact, he makes the most conversation with the customers more than the rest of our staff, including me. He took one look at the tray she purchased. It was moldy. He made a couple more attempts to try and tell her that her food had mold on it so she could get a fresh one, to no avail. He's now at a loss and just lets whatever happens happen. She ate the whole darn thing, cucumbers and all, with zero complaints. Just goes to show, when an employee comes up to you, hear out the employee just in case they have something important to tell you, such as, "Ma'am, you're about to consume mold. How about you go choose another tray free of charge?" Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Desert Boots. It says, "Her hair was so Karen, she was golden moldy." Another user down below called Ciro1399 said, "Now to question, who's more unhealthy, Karen or mold? I have a feeling the mold died from the Karen infection as soon as it entered her mouth." Okay, number one, how was Karen so oblivious that she didn't notice mold on her vegetables? That's just nasty. Number two, I don't think they should have let her eat it still, even if she was being a butthole to them. Because now, if she gets sick, it can come back on them, and she could potentially sue them for feeding her moldy stuff. So, the person in this case probably should have tried a little bit harder, or even insisted that they take the tray back, even if it meant getting somebody else involved, like a security person, to help get the tray back from her. This story comes to us from Default Anthony, original Aura Facts. About 6 months ago, I got a referral from my doctor to a medical clinic to check on a minor thing that he was not worried about but was bothering me. He wrote out the referral but couldn't refer me anywhere specific. I did some research online and found a clinic near my house. I followed their process to book an appointment and sent a picture of the referral using their online form. It took 5 months for them to find any availability, but I finally got an appointment. But after 6 months, I couldn't find the referral form anywhere. Knowing that if I started from scratch, it would take another 6 months to get an appointment, I decided to chance it. Somewhat predictably, as soon as I got to the office, they asked for the referral form. I asked them if they had the copy I sent in with the appointment request. They did, but this was not sufficient because it was an electronic copy. And I quote, "Appointments can only be held if we have the original referral or the doctor's office faxes it to us." I stared at the receptionist for a moment or two, dumbfounded by such a stupid policy. Then I asked for 10 minutes to work this out. I hustled out to my car and called my doctor's office. I got the receptionist and explained the situation. Then I grabbed a copy of the picture I had taken of my referral form, the same one they already had, and emailed it to her. She confirmed she would fax it to the clinic right away. I went back into the clinic and could barely suppress my smirk. I told the receptionist that there should be a fax from my doctor's office. As soon as she received it, she compared it to the picture she already had. "But this is the same picture that we already have." "Yes, but it was faxed from my doctor's office like you requested." Slow Pikachu face for her, big smirk for me. She called over the supervisor, who cracked up and said, "Okay." I got into my appointment, and it turns out my doctor was right, it was nothing. But I do have my pride at outsmarting their stupid system. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Anomalous Cowherd. It says, "I had the same thing with a Stone Age financial company insisting I faxed a copy of my passport to them. I had an image of it, but they wouldn't accept that. It had to be faxed. I pointed out that my passport wouldn't fit in the fax machine. They suggested photocopying it, then faxing the photocopy. So I printed my image and faxed that instead. They were happy." I think in this case, the doctor's office was just looking for confirmation that the referral form was actually coming from a doctor and not made up by OP themselves. It's actually common practice to want it done that way. They want the original, or they want something directly from the doctor because that would be the best way to verify that it's actually from the doctor. So OP, you might have maliciously complied here, but they still got exactly what they wanted in the end. This story comes to us from Superb Raccoon. Shelly's Seafood Restaurant. Don't mess with the waitress. Near my former place of work was an excellent seafood place named Shelly's. Far better than you would expect from the average strip mall outside. They made amazingly good food. The pasta jambalaya, shrimp louis, and lobster roll were particularly good. And lunch was reasonably cheap, usually $15 with tip if you stayed on the lunch menu. Unlimited bread rolls ensured you would not go hungry, and they were darn good too. One of the waitresses though, well, she could be a little trying. Must have been over 70, a former smoker, and she took 2 to 3 breaths to ask you, "What do you want to drink?" And a little hard of hearing, a challenge for my soft-spoken Australian expat coworker. But she was a fixture. So you bit your tongue and you knew the chef would lay a little extra on your plate, and sometimes free dessert, Boston cream pie house made. Except the Karens, who complained behind her back, and went to the manager, also an owner, to ask to be reseated. Of course, let me show you to the patio. Well, Jimmy and I exchanged a look because we knew the patio is only open for dinner. 15 minutes later, they stomped back in to complain that no one came to take their order, and they had to head back to the office. And what was he going to do about it? Most people take the hint, lady. Speechless, they sputtered and left. Meanwhile, our waitress wandered by with free pie and the check. "Anything else, boys?" "We're good, Shelly. Thanks for the pie." "You boys be good. See you next week." And then she wandered off, still working in the restaurant she started at 60 plus years ago, now run by her son, the manager, at the time of the incident. P.S. Just before COVID, Shelley passed away from emphysema-related problems, 89, working in her restaurant she opened with her husband at age 19, and worked there for 70 years. Her son took over as manager, but she still showed up to work every day, working the lunch hour, sometimes early dinner if she felt good. Wife and I celebrated many events there over the years, including her telling me she was pregnant after 3 years of trying and a miscarriage. Shelley was there for more than a few lunches and dinners. My mate from Australia chipped in to buy her flowers for the funeral when I told him. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called OKLengthiness8405. It says, "That's an effing dedicated woman, opening a restaurant at a young age as a girl in the 1940s, raising a family, fighting illness, and still trotting about her restaurant, serving food and pie while remembering the regulars in at least her 70s. Sounds like she did everything she wanted and lived a full life. Cheers to her." I absolutely love this story. I absolutely love the fact that people who complained to the manager were complaining to her son in the restaurant that was hers and named after her. That is absolutely beautiful. Rest in peace, Shelley. There aren't many people like you out there, and you are an absolute gem. This story comes to us from Unthanked Bus Driver. Passenger is me, the bus driver, enjoy walking 4 kilometers home. I'm a bus driver. Passengers have to press a stop button if they want the bus to stop at the next stop. Pressing the stop button flicks on a huge banner on the front of the bus, along with making a loud buzz. There are multiple stop buttons on the bus. The condition of the buses are quite bad here. Some of the stop buttons are faulty. It's usually not a big deal as passengers can see if the banner is flicked on. And if it's not, the passenger can just press another button or verbally tell me to stop. However, it just doesn't register with some passengers that there is a huge visible and audible banner. Unfortunately, these same passengers tend to lose their minds easily. It was 9:30 p.m. and I was driving between 2 large suburbs. Let's call them Sunnyvale and Riverdale. A passenger must have pressed the stop button, but it didn't register on the banner. As I drove past the stop, he yelled, "Oi, you effing dog C, you missed me stop, D-head." I apologized and tried to explain to him that the button must have been faulty and that I would drop him at the next stop. I told him that I could not drop him off on the side of the road because I would get in trouble from the bus company as they have GPS tracking whenever I open the bus door. The passenger just yelled, "Stop talking crap and open the door, ya racial slur." I stopped at the next stop about 500 meters ahead, but the passenger yelled, "Just go to Riverdale, mate, I ain't walking." Now what the passenger didn't know was that since Sunnyvale was a bigger town, the last bus from Sunnyvale to Riverdale was later than the last bus from Riverdale to Sunnyvale. He would be stranded at Riverdale 4 kilometers away from his stop. So I kept driving to Riverdale as the passenger requested. I dropped him and the other passengers off and closed the door. I could see him checking the posted timetable on the bus stop. I put my bus into gear and pulled out. I heard him exclaim, "Hey, wait!" as I did so. Unfortunately, I could not have dropped him back to his stop even if I wanted to. I have a strict schedule and change route numbers after each trip. My schedule now was to fill up the bus with diesel and head back to the depot. I filled up my bus and headed back to the bus depot. As I drove back, I saw him walking on the side of the road from 500 meters to 4,000 meters. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Spider-Knoll. It says, "I have always said don't piss off people fixing your food or keeping you alive. I will add driving your bus." Another user down below called OK Mustard Man said, "I'm surprised you aren't allowed to stop between stops at night for safety reasons. I've had drivers that have stopped closer to my road many times, but I'm a female and polite to drivers." I honestly think that part depends on how you interact with the driver. This person was just causing problems right off the bat with the way they were talking, being extremely argumentative. So I'd say OP going by the book and telling them they could get off at the next stop made more sense. And in fact, it was only 500 meters away, which really isn't that much of a walk. Now, I'm not sure if OP was morally right allowing them to get off at the next town over, knowing full well that they'd have to walk all the way back because there wasn't another bus going there, but I think I'll leave that one up to you guys. What do you think about this one? Comment down below. And if you're listening on the podcast, make sure to go to YouTube and comment down below. This story comes to us from A Quiet Borderline. Let go of my kitten. Have fun catching him. This happened a few minutes ago and I'm still laughing. As I've mentioned in previous posts, I have an ESA named Mr. Wellington, a kitten of about 8 months. He's a sweet, adorable fellow who insists on cuddle time. However, he's a mischievous little devil. His second favorite game to play is ignore the cat wand and scratching post and attack mommy's arms, legs, feet, and hands with jaws and claws. We're still working on his biting and clawing. His first favorite game, wait until I open the door to my small dorm room and scurry up and down the hallway like a toddler high on Mountain Dew and Pixie Sticks, leading mommy on a merry chase up and down the hall until I catch him. As it's the holiday season, there's practically nobody in the dorms. I have permission to live in the dorms until I'm able to get a place of my own to live. Also, in the dorm is a young woman who is an animal lover. Let's call her Clarice. Unfortunately, she has something of an I know how to handle animals vibe. I had decided to go to the kitchen in the basement, I live on the second floor, to get my meager Christmas dinner. Unfortunately, Mr. Wellington must have seen The Great Escape and ran into the hallway. Cue me walking up and down the hallway after Mr. Wellington for a good 5 minutes, trying to catch him. Eventually, I managed to wrangle him. I'm carrying Mr. Wellington back to my room when Clarice popped her head out. Now, I'm holding him on one arm with my other hand on his back to keep him from turning into the Tasmanian devil. As I mentioned, he likes to bite and claw me. Apparently, this wasn't how Clarice thought I should handle him. Let go of him. Malicious Compliance cued. Okay, I said, and took my hand off his back. Mr. Wellington sensed my hand moved and took a flying leap out of my arms, starting to run back up the hallway. Clarice looked at me and said, "Aren't you going to catch him?" I grinned and said, "You don't like how I was handling him, so I figured you could get control of him." Clarice realized she'd been had and laughed. I'm not that much of a monster, so we went back up the hallway to capture ourselves a kitten. We got him, and I took him back to the room. Now, Mr. Wellington is lounging on the bed, watching me eat some pasta salad, and drinking Diet Coke. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Gifted Garden Snail. It says, "Sport socks. The longer the better. Put 2 of those thick, ugly sport tennis socks over the same hand and let him attack the horrible almighty sock monster. With your fingers in the toes and thumb in the heel, you have just enough grip to grab a paw or head. Ours love to attack and hold on with all her might to the point you could just move the entire cat from side to side, hanging from your hand and arm." I thought OP's neighbor was going to be a bit of a Karen in this one, and they sounded like they were at the beginning, but then when they had a mutual laugh at the expense of the kitten running down the hallway, it made this story just kinda wholesome. Now, I did a bit of digging into OP's profile. There's many posts on there, and it seems like OP's going through a little bit of a hard time. So I want to say to you, A Quiet Borderline, we really hope you get back on your feet soon. We love your stories, and thank you so much for the entertainment you provide us on a regular basis. This story comes to us from Tenebrous Sunshine. Husband tries to warn neighbors about their landscaping, gets told to mind his own business. Some background. My husband is pretty handy. Prior to COVID, he had done several flip houses as a fun side gig. It's what he loves to do. And he became very familiar with a ton of city codes. During COVID, seems everyone was suddenly buying houses to flip out of boredom and prices skyrocketed. So he put that on hold. So then he started doing household repairs and upgrades, building fences, etc. around the neighborhood as well. To get a better understanding of the neighborhood HOA bylaws and whatnot, he joined the HOA Architectural Committee. Through that, he learned all there was to know about what was allowed and what was not, how the process worked, how to work around things, etc. Long story short, my husband was very knowledgeable in what to do and not do, and various processes with the neighborhood and the city. Our next door neighbor decided they were going to start landscaping their backyard, and they, I guess, planned to make theirs as similar to our backyard as possible. Problem was, despite being next door neighbors, our land was quite different. For one thing, behind our house was a bunch of brush and pine trees, maybe 3 to 4 feet from the lake that's at the back of the house. We didn't have to do a whole lot to clear the area, but the brush on their property was about 1/3 of their yard, I'd say 10 feet from the water. Also, the way the houses on our street are, the land naturally made like a valley where the houses to our right are at the top, we're in the middle, and the next 2 houses are at the bottom, before it very quickly rises again. First thing the neighbors did was cut down all the trees in their backyard. They were not small trees either, but 4-story tall trees or more. Husband and neighbor were talking about the backyard plans when my husband casually mentioned he was surprised the city gave him permission to cut down so many trees. In our city, you had to have an arborist give permission to cut down any trees that were over X feet tall. Neighbor first said it wasn't the city's business what he did with his backyard, then told my husband to mind his own business. Okay, fair enough. Then they started putting up the retaining wall to bring it up to level with our property, which would have been about 7 to 8 feet tall. Basically, they were just stacking a bunch of cinder blocks. My husband uneasily asked if their landscapers had ever done a retaining wall like that and if the city approved it. City says that if a retaining wall is over 5 feet tall, you need a structural engineer to come out. Neighbor said again it wasn't any of the city's business what he did to his yard, and for my husband to mind his own business. While they're filling up the backyard to bring theirs level to ours, the landscapers are dumping all the dirt, gravel, and sand in the street, blocking a little over half the road. Several of the neighbors who had trucks would just hop the curb, but other neighbors with smaller cars were mad. Before my husband could ask if they could put the dirt and stuff in their driveway instead of the road, like everyone else, neighbor went off on my husband to F right off. Well, okay then, my husband let them continue working and didn't say a word as they started constructing a 10-foot tall fence, which was against HOA regulations. Fences couldn't be taller than 6 feet. Between them starting construction 6 days a week before 7 a.m. and them blocking the road, I guess someone had had enough. Next thing I know, city officials are out there putting a big sign in the yard saying all construction was to be halted until further notice. It wasn't us, but my husband found out through the architectural committee that someone had complained about the noise and the road blockage to the HOA, who came out to investigate, saw everything they had done, and then reported them to the city. They got a hefty fine for every tree stump the city official found. The structural engineer said their retaining wall was not sound and had to be redone, and it had to have regular inspections during its build. The HOA told them that not only did they have to take down their 10-foot tall fence, but as they did not get prior approval, and because it was not an approved design, the HOA also hit them with a hefty fine. Initially, neighbor came after us for tattling, but we told them it wasn't us, as nothing they did affected us in any way. Our kids are early risers, so even starting before 7 didn't bother us. My husband then said he tried to warn them this would happen, but neighbor told him to F off and mind his own business, and he did. Landscaping had started on Black Friday, was shut down for 3 weeks, while I guess they got things sorted out with the city and HOA. Their backyard is still not finished. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, I truly want to say it wasn't us that called the HOA or city. We just let him be, but he pissed off a lot of neighbors. When cutting down those trees, he had chainsaws and the wood chippers going off by 6:45, and the bobcat being used by 7 a.m. 6 days a week. Other neighbors tried to ask him to put his dirt on his driveway instead of the street. He told them off to mind their own business too. And a few people went ballistic on him when their cars slid a bit after the rains we had turned the remaining dirt to mud. The school bus could also easily have complained to someone about it too, as it was a big ordeal for them. Also, there were other things he did to his front yard that we didn't warn him about either, and he got dinged for, but I made this post mostly about him trying to go against the city. Although the changes he made to the driveway also got dinged by the city. And yes, from what I heard, the tree fines were painful. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called 2MZ. It says, "The tree bit pisses me off. If you don't want large pine trees in your backyard, don't buy a house with large pine trees in the backyard. Those things take decades to get that big, and tons of people would love to have them back there." Another commenter down below called Bot Hunter said, "Oof, neighbor cut down a bunch of trees without consulting an arborist, and then built a giant retaining wall out of cinder blocks. They're just begging for their house to slide downhill and probably take OP's house with it." Just think, OP, if you'd reported them earlier, you probably would have saved them a lot of money. Even though we know you didn't report them in the end, or at least you say you didn't. Another thing to think about here is they're building in a valley and they were raising their backyard by 8 feet. Doesn't that change the drainage in that valley completely? Like, that really could put OP's house at risk here. There's a reason for permits and inspections, and if you don't do them, well, it's on you when you have to pay to make it right. This story comes to us from Obnoxious Anon. Want me to wash my dishes? Oh sure, I will. This happened over 3 years ago, and while telling it to my friend, she laughingly said, "Such a malicious compliance," so decided to share here. When I first started to my very first corporate job, there was a kitchen full of utensils, and fridge, and oven, and stove, and a dishwasher. A full-fledged kitchen for employees to make tea, coffee, heat their meals, even cook. They said I can bring my own glasses and put them there, or use the company's. Also, there was a woman who was working in the kitchen. Let's call her Nilly, since she puts rules willy-nilly like a bully. Second day of my job, dear Nilly told me, "Let me remind you that no one should leave their dirty dishes in the sink." I was surprised by the claim. Since I am new and don't know a single crap, I thought this might be her way of bullying, or it might be actually true. So smiled and asked if this means I have to wash my own glasses. She said, "Yes, don't make me repeat it twice, honey." Let me remind you, there's a dishwasher. If she isn't cleaning the dishes, her only remaining job is vacuum the office once a week and bring tea and coffee to chiefs, to meetings, and to managers. So I decided to gather information and wait on it. Apparently, Nilly has been working in the company for 20 years and knows the CEO. She knows how he drinks his tea, how he drinks his coffee, when he drinks them, what he eats with his coffee and tea. She knows all of them. If I know one thing, that is never fight a fight with the person who knows how your boss likes his coffee, especially if you're replaceable. So fight was not an option. Cool. I also learned that once a week, CEO brings a bag of fruits to the kitchen to share in the company. Apparently, he has a fruit garden and goes there for weekends, and she would take fruits to her house at the end of the day. Old employees knew that. They would take 1 or 2 in the day. That's how I learned this. She said to me, I can get one, but it is hers. So I refused the first time offer, thinking she bought it, then learned that it was brought by the CEO. I think she implied that the CEO brought it to her, and she was generous enough to share it with us peasants, but this is my interpretation of her statement. One thing about me, I look young and naive. I look dumb, as if there is some missing component in my brain. Cue Malicious Compliance. From my desk, I could partially see the kitchen if I turn around, so on the day of fruit delivery, I was constantly checking the kitchen. When CEO came in, I count to 30 and went in as well, to wash my glasses, of course. I went in and said hi to everyone. This was my first time seeing CEO, So he said, "You must be new," kindly and respectfully informed who I am, and he told me who he was. I said, "Sir, I've checked the company before entering and knew him," which he liked. After I turned to wash my dishes, he asked me what I was doing, and I said, "Oh, I was informed that all the staff wash their own dishes." At the same time, our Nilly said I must have mistaken that while laughing and taking the sponge and glasses out of my hand. I said, "But you," as if shocked, as if realization hit me, then smiled like she is my best friend. Of course, I didn't stop there. I looked at the fruits. CEO told me to take some fruits, added that he brought them to the company so all the staff could enjoy. I haven't said anything, but from my expression, CEO asked what was wrong. I told nothing and told I always thought they were Nillies since. Then I just smiled and asked if I can take a plate of them. With a huge plate of fruit accompanied by a huge smile, I went to my desk, shared them with my team. I don't even like fruits. Couple hours later, I went to kitchen and our dear Nilly told me I had misunderstood things and washing dishes was her job and I shouldn't mistake again. And added fruits were for everyone to share and I should have taken more if I wanted. I stupidly said, "Oh, I didn't know," and how sorry I am to cause her trouble with a sorry smile. Guess who never had to wash dishes and had fruits to eat every day? If your answer is Cleopatra, probably yes, but also me. Nilly would also bring tea and coffee to me from time to time. If someone she served did not want to drink, I would thank her with a huge smile and take it. Apparently, she does this to all the employees she likes. OP added a quick edit at the bottom. It says, "I called them fruits instead of specifying what they were because CEO would bring apples, oranges, tangerines, pears, even sweet cherries. I don't remember what was the specific fruit that day." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Brilliant Athlete 67. It says, "Well played. I would have loved to see Nilly as you unrolled the sweet, sweet malicious compliance." OP responded to this one and said, "It was hilarious. Took all my willpower to look dumbfounded and shocked. Then graciously took all the blame. Oh, my mistake, dummy me." So OP, I guess you could say in this case you're just sitting back and enjoying the fruits of your malicious compliance. It seems like the lady working in the cafeteria just wanted to appear more important than they actually were. If you're going to lie to people about things in a work setting, they are generally going to come back on you. It's just a matter of time. This story comes to us from Brew3017. "Everyone got mad because I took charge when no one else would. Sure, I let them dig their own grave." About 14 years ago, I went to work for a major petroleum company in Indianapolis. Over my 4 years there, I applied myself and gained enough knowledge to be more knowledgeable than the most senior guy. Well, one day, stuff hit the fan and we were looking at a potentially major spill because the packing in a pump had failed. Nobody was doing anything, and I'm a take charge kind of guy, so I started barking orders. Now, you have to understand, this would have been an EPA nightmare, so there was no time for niceties. The other employees went and complained, and I was called into the manager's office and was told about the complaints that I just barked orders and didn't ask nicely. He told me that I did the right thing and that next time, if it wasn't going to be a major issue, to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Bet. So the next time I saw that they had the valve set up in such a way that 2 soap tanks for making asphalt emulsion would overflow, and while not an EPA big deal, it would bring scrutiny from the health, environmental, safety, and security decision of our company, I mentioned to them that they might want to check the valve lineup because something didn't look right. Well, they told me to mind my own business. As it was time for me to go home, I called the manager from my car and said, "You should probably start heading to the terminal because 2 tanks are about to overrun." I tried to tell them, but they told me to mind my own business. I didn't get halfway home before a neighbor to the facility came knocking on the door saying liquid was overflowing 2 tanks. As the only first responder not involved in the incident, I had to return to the facility and supervise cleanup until the big guns from corporate came in about 3 hours later. all 3 were put on probation and then eventually fired for more screw-ups. The beauty of this was after that incident, they were told to follow what I said explicitly and never again complain that someone doesn't say please and thank you in a crisis. They all hated me until the day they left. Why? Because I was the only person to take charge when no one else would. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called NYDitch. It says, yeah, in an emergency, the person who knows what to do needs to be blunt, direct, and loud. If there is a time for niceties, it's after with a nice work and man, that could have been bad, but y'all stepped up. Another commenter down below called Dry Pryon said, every time I hear about niceties in emergency situations, it makes me laugh. Listen, languages with polite forms like Korean and Japanese can make communication between seniors and juniors difficult. However, even in those societies, there are protocols in place that prohibit the use of polite forms because that can waste precious time in situations where every millisecond counts. Even in military communications, polite form is prohibited to minimize misunderstanding and maximize clarity and efficiency. Please and thank you have no place during emergency situations, but should be given in abundance afterwards to people whose actions earned them. An issue you run into is if you're being too nice to people in an emergency situation, they may not think that it's as urgent as it actually is. Saying to someone, hey, could you please go over there and get that fire extinguisher so we can put out this fire, isn't anywhere near as effective as, get that extinguisher and put this out. And I completely agree with both of these commenters. After the emergency situation is dealt with, you tell those people who did things the right way that you wanted that they did a great job, and thank you for doing what they were told. God, that workplace must be full of a bunch of whiny little